Chapter 1 The new transfer student, Kushina, shows who's boss. Class, today we have a new student joining us. Let's all give her a warm welcome. Mr. Waymura led a little girl with long red hair into the classroom, starting the applause. Go ahead, introduce yourself to your classmates. Hello, everyone. My name is Kushina, Izumaki Kushina. It's nice to meet you all. Please take care of me. But instead of the enthusiastic response Kushina hoped for, she was met with murmurs and whispers. Look, she has red hair. That's so weird. Yeah, nobody in Konoha has red hair. Do you think she's some kind of red hair demon? PFFT. More like a chili pepper, with that bright red hair. Hearing her classmates' comments, Kushina, already nervous and feeling insecure, turned pale. These brats, I'm standing right here, you know. Mr. Waymura's face twitched with anger at their remarks. His face darkened, and he slammed his hand on the desk, roaring. Enough, you little brats. You can't talk about a classmate like that. It's rude. Seeing their teacher lose his temper, the students quickly shut up. Kushina, find an empty seat and sit down. Don't mind what they said. They didn't mean it. Mr. Waymura immediately demonstrated what it means to change expressions instantly. His dark expression vanished, replaced with a warm, friendly smile. Yes, sir. After bowing and thanking Mr. Waymura, Kushina looked around the crowded classroom. After scanning the room, she found an empty seat. The only available seat was in the last row. So, she lowered her head and walked over. The seat by the window on the right side of the last row was already taken, so Kushina had to sit in a slightly more central position. I need to get along with my classmates and make new friends. That's the only way I'll fit in faster here in Konoha. Remembering what Maito Uzumaki had told her, Kushina's eyes welled up a bit. The kind grandmother who had been the closest thing to family here in Konoha was gone. Now, she was all alone. Hello, I'm Kushina. Kushina quietly encouraged herself, deciding to start by getting to know her seatmate. Kushina hadn't expected her seatmate, who had been staring out the window, to only glance at her indifferently. His gaze was as calm as if he were looking at a complete stranger. N/O/bell/B/jn.C//om. After hesitating for a few seconds, he finally spoke. Takuya. What's the deal? There were so many seats available, but you had to sit next to me. Minato, come get your future wife. Nice to meet you. Undeterred, Kushina continued. Takuya didn't understand why Kushina was making an effort to chat, so after a slight nod, he resumed looking out the window. She's the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. It's better to keep my distance so I don't attract attention from the Anbu or the Root Ninjas. The third Hokage and Danzo aren't people you want to mess with. Besides, with who I am, it's better if I don't get too close to a Jinchuriki. As the lesson began, Kushina tried to focus, but soon she began to feel sleepy. She hasn't had a good night's sleep since she arrived in Konoha. Red-haired demon. Little red pepper. She's a freak. As soon as the teacher left after class, a group of brats turned their attention to the back of the classroom. They hurled all kinds of insults at Kushina. These kids are so mean. Suddenly wide awake, Kushina's little face turned as red as her hair in anger. Wow, you guys are really asking for it, messing with little pepper like that. You must have a death wish. Takuya admired the boldness of these kids, daring to mess with Kushina. Don't be fooled by her gentle appearance now, thinking she's an easy target. But once you cross her line and truly piss her off, she'll show you why they call her the Red Hot Habanero. As her classmates continued to mock her, Kushina, who had just gone through the trauma of losing her family, couldn't hold back anymore. She clenched her fists, trying to stay calm. Aha, look at her. She's mad. Her face is as red as her hair. Whoa, so scary. She really is a red-haired demon. No, wait, a red-haired witch. My mom says red-haired witches like to eat little kids. Ah. The kid who had been gleefully taunting her suddenly screamed as Kushina knocked him to the ground with a single punch. Furious beyond measure, Kushina's red hair began to float as if lifted by an invisible force. A terrifying chakra erupted in the classroom. What's happening? The Anbu ninja, who had been monitoring Kushina, was startled. This Nine-Tails Jinchuriki's chakra is intense. You. All of you, just drop dead. Unable to bear it any longer, Kushina grabbed the terrified kids one by one and knocked them all to the ground. Watching Kushina unleash her fury, Takuya sighed inwardly. It's the same nine tails, but why is the difference so big? Inside Takuya's mind, in his consciousness space, a small fox resembling the nine tails was lying down, yawning. The difference was that this nine tails was white, with softer features. The chakra Kushina unleashed had traces of the nine tails mixed in, making Takuya a bit envious. Thankfully, my nine tails, though still weak and slowly growing, won't be detected by anyone. Unless I reveal it myself, no one will know I'm a Jinchuriki too. And my nine tails is exclusive, bound to me, and will never leave my body. The safety factor is off the charts. Before crossing over, Takuya had been lounging at home, eating watermelon, enjoying the air conditioning, and playing a Naruto mobile game. Because of his love for the Sharingan, Takuya had chosen the Uchiha faction. He had leveled up, gathered materials, and spent a lot of money to obtain the Mangekyo, Sharingan, Eternal Mangekyo, and even the Rinnegan. Just when Takuya thought he was about to graduate from the game, the developers introduced a Jinchuriki feature. Players could spend money on tickets to draw the tailed beast they liked and become Jinchuriki, significantly boosting their combat power. Takuya had spent a small fortune to get that white nine tails. But he never imagined that after finally obtaining it, he'd wake up in a different world. Wah, she's so scary. Those who had mocked Kushina and given her nicknames were all beaten up, their faces bruised and swollen. The entire classroom was in chaos, like a large-scale brawl. This was enough to show just how fierce Kushina's combat skills were. Haha. This girl is kind of scary. Sitting in the third row, Minato tried to laugh it off, but it was clear he was nervous. Earlier that morning, he had thought Kushina was adorable, especially with her long red hair. That immediately caught his eye. Who would have guessed that this red-haired girl was indeed a fiery pepper? Once provoked, she could beat you up until you were seeing stars. After taking down everyone who had insulted her, Kushina finally began to calm down. But just then, Minato let out a nervous laugh. What the hell are you laughing at? What's so funny? Laugh again, and I'll beat you up too. Kushina's just calmed down anger flared up again at Minato's chuckle. She slammed her hand on the desk so hard that Minato nearly fell off his chair. Gulp. Seeing the handprint left on the desk, a few drops of cold sweat rolled down Minato's forehead. He couldn't imagine what would happen if that hand had landed on him. He'd probably have a few broken bones. Besides the kids groaning on the ground, the others no longer dared to make fun of Kushina. After glaring at everyone, Kushina angrily walked back to her seat. It was only then that Kushina noticed that her seatmate, Takuya, was quite a strange person. When others laughed at her and bullied her, Takuya didn't react at all. When she lashed out and started hitting people, Takuya remained seated, unperturbed, without even a change in his expression. Even when she returned to her seat, he only gave her a calm glance before turning back to look out the window. What in the world happened here? Hearing the commotion, Mr. Waymura rushed back into the classroom and saw the scene that looked like a massive brawl. His mind went blank. Great. Just great. The parents of these beaten kids are definitely going to cause a scene. Teacher, Kushina hit us. A few of the kids who had been badly beaten quickly began to tattle. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Call in the parents. Who? Tsunade. Kushina. Mr. Waymura felt a headache coming on. The third Hokage himself had told him that Kushina's background was special and that he should take extra care of her. But now, Kushina had gone and hit a bunch of kids, practically a third of the class. You're lying. You all made fun of me and gave me those awful nicknames. Kushina had quickly shed her earlier timid demeanor, transforming into the feisty, red-hot chili pepper she was known for. She was all thorns now. Anyone who got too close would get pricked. Enough. All of you, shut up. Mr. Waymura shot a stern look at the tattletales. He knew exactly which students were the troublemakers. Sure, Kushina was at fault, but they weren't innocent either. Takuya, Minato, you two come to the office as well. Why me? I was just watching the show. Takuya sighed, standing up alongside Minato, and followed Kushina and the beaten-up students to the teacher's office. Takuya, that Kushina girl is really fierce. Since you're sitting next to her, you'd better be careful, Minato whispered as they walked. What? Takuya, lost in thought, hadn't been paying attention and turned to look at him. Was I talking too quietly? Minato blinked in surprise and raised his voice. I said, that Kushina girl is really fierce. Since you're her seatmate, you better watch out so you don't get hit. Is that so? Takuya stifled a laugh, patting Minato's shoulder with a sympathetic look. I think you should worry about yourself. I have a feeling you're the one who's going to get hit. Me. Get hit? By who? Before Minato could fully process Takuya's words, he felt a pair of eyes boring into him. Instinctively, he looked up and shivered. Kushina had stopped in her tracks, her fists clenched and was glaring at him with a fierce expression. Her long red hair was starting to float, definitely a sign she was about to lose her temper. Good luck. Takuya quickly slipped away. Hey. You traitor. Minato felt like crying. He was sure Takuya had just thrown him under the bus. Why can't I keep my mouth shut? Now I'm in for it. Kushina shot Minato a threatening look and then turned away with an irritated huff. In the teacher's office, Takuya summed things up quickly. These idiots made fun of Kushina and gave her rude nicknames, so she hit them. That's the gist of it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Minato echoed nervously. After already angering Kushina, he didn't dare say anything that might make things worse. The last thing he wanted was to get cornered after school and take a beating. Mr. Waimura rubbed his temples, trying to ease the headache he felt coming on. Takuya, you shouldn't talk about your classmates like that. If they're useless and just like to cause trouble, what else would you call them? Takuya glanced at the group in the office with a cold, indifferent look. Everyone he glanced at quickly lowered their heads, too afraid to meet his gaze. None of them dared to argue against being called useless. Takuya, you. Mr. Waimura sighed in frustration. If it were anyone else, he might have scolded them, but Takuya had a point. Besides, he wasn't exactly on friendly terms with these classmates either. The reason? Just like Kushina, he'd been given a nickname, the silver-haired Uchiha freak. And /o/bell/b/jn.c//om. Takuya had started waiting for them after school, and anyone who dared cross him got a beating. Before long, these students started avoiding him like the plague. You and Minato can head back to class now, Mr. Waimura said, dismissing them with a wave before turning to Kushina. Kushina, this has turned into a pretty big deal today. I think it would be best if you went home and brought a parent back to discuss this. How does that sound? PFFFT. Takuya, who was just about to leave with Minato, burst out laughing at the suggestion. Minato blinked in confusion, unsure of why this was funny. Isn't it normal to call your parents after getting into a fight? Call a parent. Who's she supposed to call? Tsunade. Oh man, if Tsunade gets called to school, that's going to be something. Takuya, how about I come over to your place for dinner tonight? I can stop by the market after school to pick up some groceries, Minato suggested, eager to change the subject. Sure, whatever you think. I'll handle the rest. No problem. The two were neighbors and classmates, so they were closer than most. After Takuya had invited Minato over for dinner once, Minato kept trying to come over for meals. So, let me get this straight, you got teased by your classmates, so you hit them, and now they want you to bring a parent to school. Tsunade grumbled, scratching her tousled blonde hair in irritation. She'd been enjoying a late sleep when Kushina had dragged her out of bed. Once she was awake enough to understand the situation, her irritation grew. Who asked you to bring a parent? Tsunade's temper flared instantly. I've been getting into fights since I was a kid, and no one ever dared to ask me to bring a parent. Give me a few minutes, I am going to teach them a lesson. Before Mito Uzumaki passed away, she had asked Tsunade to look after Kushina, so there was no way Tsunade was going to let this slide. Not only did Tsunade think Kushina wasn't in the wrong for hitting those kids, but she also believed they deserved it. It reminded her of a certain perverted troublemaker who always got on her nerves. After a quick wash that didn't do much to cover up the smell of alcohol, Tsunade stormed to the Ninja Academy with Kushina, kicking the office door open. Inside, Mr. Waimura was struggling to deal with the angry parents of the beaten students. He was about to yell when the door was suddenly kicked open, but when he saw who it was, his anger vanished. Who the hello? Seeing who had entered, Mr. Waimura quickly jumped up from his chair and offered it to Tsunade. Lady Tsunade, welcome. But Tsunade wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. She shot a cold glare at the confused parents, before turning to Mr. Waimura with a smirk. So, you're the one who told Kushina to bring a parent? Oh, yes, I did. Why didn't I check the calendar before leaving the house today? Well, here I am. So, what's the problem? Don't waste my time, I've got a nap to get back to. And as for you all. Tsunade leaned back in the chair, crossing her legs, and pointed at the parents who had come to complain. Your kids bullied my little sister on her first day, and I haven't even dealt with that yet. If this isn't handled properly, I'll have my sister wait for them at the gate every day after school. Even though Tsunade hadn't yet earned the title of one of the Sannin, her fiery temper was well known throughout Konoha. Combined with her status, she could practically walk on air. In the village, she was also the only one among the future Sannin who dared to openly scold Danzo and the two elders. Not even Drea or Orochimaru would go that far, no matter how angry they got. I think I just saw Lady Tsunade. Tsunade was a celebrity in Konoha, being the granddaughter of the first Hokage and officially recognized as the Princess of Konoha by the Daio made her impossible to miss. Minato was buzzing with excitement. Takuya yawned, slumping over his desk as he mumbled. What's there to be excited about? Shouldn't you be more worried about your safety? Tsunade is Kushina's guardian, and you just pissed Kushina off. What do you think she'll do to you? Minato's excitement evaporated, his smile freezing. Please don't see me. Please don't see me. When Kushina came back to class, Minato silently prayed that she would overlook him and just let him be. Thankfully, while Kushina was still angry, she wasn't in the habit of hitting people without reason. Though she was annoyed with Minato for saying she had a bad temper, she wasn't planning to corner him after school. Once school let out, Minato grabbed Takuya and ran. He didn't want to take any chances of getting caught by Kushina. Dude, that's your future wife. Could you embarrass yourself anymore? After the fight, Kushina gradually found her place in the class. The kids she had beaten up now gave her a wide berth. Even Minato kept his distance. Takuya, would you like to have lunch with me? Kushina hesitated for a while before finally pulling out the oversized bento box she had prepared and inviting Takuya to join her. Minato had just stood up to head over to Takuya when he saw this and quickly changed direction, leaving the classroom in a hurry. He clearly hadn't forgotten Kushina's fiery temper. Not only was Kushina strong, but she was also easily the strongest in their grade. The only one who didn't seem to fear her was Takuya. Minato might have been a genius, but at this point, he was still just an ordinary kid, not yet the fastest man in the ninja world. At this stage, the best thing Minato could do when faced with Kushina was to steer clear. Sorry, I'm not a big fan of rice balls or sashimi. Glancing at her bento box, Takuya politely declined and grabbed his lunch, heading after Minato. Chapter 3, Takuya Yagami, also known as Takuya Uchiha. Feeling rejected, Kushina slumped over her desk. The lunch she had painstakingly prepared no longer looked appetizing. She had only wanted to thank Takuya for speaking up for her in the office, nothing more. But Takuya had turned her down. Aren't you and Kushina? Minato asked, surprised as he looked at Takuya, who was now sitting beside him. Takuya shrugged as he opened his lunchbox. I don't like rice balls or sashimi. You know that, so I declined. It was true Takuya didn't care for those foods. But more importantly, he didn't want to draw the attention of the Anbu. Being under their watch would be uncomfortable, to say the least. After all, he had a lot of secrets that needed to stay hidden. Haha, you're a real bro, Minato laughed, misunderstanding the situation. He thought Takuya had turned Kushina down just to hang out with him. Some bro. Takuya thought to himself. You could at least keep your chopsticks out of my lunchbox when you say that. After a long day of classes, Takuya finally headed home. He slipped into the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His once blue eyes were now red, with 2 tomo spinning in each of them. So my single tomo Sharingan evolved into 2 tomo without any warning. Is this because of the game character's influence? Takuya deactivated the Sharingan and flopped onto his bed, exhausted. His full name was Takuya Yagami, and he had Uchiha blood in him. His mother was from the Uchiha clan, and after his father died in battle, she had tried to bring him back to the Uchiha. But his silver hair and his own resistance to the idea put an end to that. Not to mention, there were plenty of Ukuas who were against his return to the clan. When Takuya first arrived in this world, he discovered that he already had a single tomo Sharingan and the white nine tails from the game inside him. Unfortunately, this special nine tails was still small. It had taken over a year for it to grow to its current size. The good news was that the nine tails was unique to him, and unless he wanted to reveal it, no one would ever know it was there. Takuya hadn't experienced any intense emotional trauma when his Sharingan first manifested. Even now, its evolution seems to happen without any real trigger. If all my in-game abilities show up in this world, then full control of a complete Ninetales with Sage Mode and the Rinnegan at its peak. If I can pull that off, Danzo wouldn't stand a chance. One day, I'll crush him like a bug. For now, I'll just keep my head down. It's fine to be a genius, but I can't be a freak. Geniuses get nurtured, freaks get targeted. Meanwhile, Kushina returned to the Senju compound. Because she was still young, there was an agreement between Maito Uzumaki and the third Hokage that Kushina would stay at the Senju compound until she graduated from the academy. This way, Tsunade could provide her with some help when needed. Wow, lunch is ready. Nawaki exclaimed as he returned home, spotting the bento on the table and digging in. He even asked Tsunade if she wanted some. Kushina worked hard to make this lunch last night, Tsunade remarked, taking a rice ball and biting into it. She told me she wanted to thank a classmate for helping her, so she made this. Looks like she got turned down. Turned down. Nawaki's eyes widened. Who had the guts to turn down Kushina's kindness? Yeah, I got turned down. Kushina emerged from her room, looking dejected, and flopped down next to Tsunade. She irritably ruffled her hair. Takuya said he doesn't like rice balls or sashimi. Ugh, I spent so much time preparing it. I never thought I'd see the day when this little girl would be so troubled by something. Tsunade nearly burst out laughing. She kicked Nawaki under the table, making him wince in pain. Do you know anything about this Takuya Yagami kid? What's he like? Takuya Yagami. Nawaki rubbed the spot where he'd been kicked and thought for a moment before replying. I think he's a lower grade student. I've heard some girls in our grades say he's really good looking. They're all crazy about him. Oh no. Tsunade grinned mischievously and nudged Kushina with her shoulder. Kushina, you're under a lot of pressure. Handsome boys are always popular, unlike some people. No way. Kushina's face turned bright red. She admitted Takuya was good looking, but that wasn't why she wanted to thank him. Why are you dragging me into this, sis? Nawaki felt a pang of injustice. I'm not as bad as you're making me out to be. And I'm your brother, your real brother. What kind of sister calls her own brother ugly? Ignoring Nawaki's grumbling, Tsunade offered Kushina a suggestion. Here's an idea. How about you invite him over for dinner sometime? That way, you can thank him properly, and I can see what he's like. What? No way. Kushina leapt up, blushing furiously, and shouted, it's not like that at all. I just wanted to thank him, Tsunade. You're being so mean. With that, she covered her face and ran back to her room. TCH, little girls get embarrassed so easily. Tsunade laughed wickedly. You're acting like you're so mature, Nawaki grumbled internally. Forget about dinner at home. You're better off eating out. It's not going to happen here, he said aloud. Why not? Tsunade asked, confused. Then, narrowing her eyes, she clenched her fist. Are you saying that brat won't give me the respect I deserve? Does he not know who I am? I'm Tsunade Senju. That's not it. Nawaki quickly explained, seeing Tsunade ready to explode. It's because Takuya Yagami goes by another name. What do you mean? How many names does one person need? Takuya Uchiha. Nawaki spread his hands in resignation. Some girls say Takuya Yagami is his birth name, but before his mother passed away, she wanted him to return to the Uchiha clan because he has Uchiha blood. But it never happened. An Uchiha kid, huh? No wonder Nawaki reacted the way he did. This could be a problem, especially since Kushina was the Ninetales Jinchuriki. Never mind, let's just forget this whole thing. It's probably for the best that he refused. Even if he wasn't officially part of the Uchiha clan, his bloodline made it unwise for him to get too close to a Jinchuriki. Tsunade didn't have any prejudice against the Uchiha, even if most of them were a bit off. But the third Hokage, Danzo, and the elders wouldn't allow something like that to happen. If Takuya and Kushina stayed just classmates, maybe even friends, it might be okay. But if they got any closer, the higher-ups would do everything in their power to keep him away from her. Today, we'll be covering shuriken throwing techniques. Please turn to page. Takuya was back to his usual self, staring out the window as if something outside had caught his interest. Kushina glanced at him, then looked again a few moments later. Finally, she couldn't resist, and passed him a note. A note. Takuya almost forgot the last time he'd seen one of these. Probably sometime in middle school back in his previous life, before everyone stopped passing notes. Who would have thought that after crossing worlds, someone would send him one? Why aren't you paying attention in class? You're always looking out the window. The note. Read. Takuya glanced at it, then pushed it back. Because there's nothing else to do. If you already understand the lesson, you can do the same. Oh. Kushina hadn't expected Takuya to answer her aloud instead of passing another note. Takuya Yagami. Kushina Uzumaki. Mr. Waimura had finally had enough. He slammed his hand on the desk and yelled, even if you already know the lesson, don't disrupt the class. If you're going to pass notes, don't do it in front of me. Uh-oh. We've been caught. Kushina blushed furiously and quickly buried her face in her arms on the desk. But Takuya acted like nothing had happened, completely unfazed by Mr. Waimura's scolding, and ignoring the strange looks from their classmates. Everything that happened in the classroom was observed by the Anbu. They even saw what Kushina had written on the note. You're saying Kushina passed a note to that Takuya Yagami kid? The third Hokage asked, reviewing Takuya's file. I didn't realize this kid had such a connection to the Uchiha. Has he shown any interest in joining the Uchiha? No, Lord Hokage. Ever since his mother passed away, Takuya Yagami hasn't visited the Uchiha compound. And it seems the Uchiha aren't too keen on having him back either. A Nine-Tails Jinchuriki showing interest in someone with Uchiha blood. That's not good. Fortunately, Takuya hasn't joined the Uchiha. After thinking it over, the third Hokage instructed the Anbu, keep monitoring them. If Takuya Yagami shows any interest in Kushina, intervene immediately. We can't allow a Jinchuriki to get too close to someone with Uchiha blood. Even if Takuya wasn't fully part of the Uchiha clan, the risk was too great. Understood, Lord Hokage. The Anbu left the Hokage's office and resumed shadowing Kushina and Takuya, keeping a close watch on their every move. Master, there's someone outside who doesn't seem to like you very much. A soft, feminine voice echoed in Takuya's mind. It was the Nine-Tails. Takuya's white Nine-Tails was female, the opposite of the one sealed inside Kushina. Even though gender didn't really apply to the tailed beasts, Takuya figured their voices were a good way to tell them apart. Chapter 4. Does being handsome mean you can do whatever you want? Takuya was well aware that the Anbu were watching him. They had only started keeping an eye on him because of Kushina. As long as he didn't do anything drastic, their focus would eventually shift away. Hey, Nine-Tails, when will you be as strong as that big fox next door? Takuya asked. Master, I'm still young, and my chakra refining is really slow, the little Nine-Tails pouted. The big Nine-Tails next door had split off from the Ten-Tails, while she had to grow from nothing. It was a much slower process. Takuya, would you like to have lunch together? It was lunchtime, and a female classmate had invited Takuya to share her lunch. Kushina's eyes widened as she watched, curious to see if Takuya would accept or reject the invitation as he had with her. Sorry, but I don't like eating with people who aren't good-looking, Takuya replied bluntly, turning the girl down with a stinging rejection. This was why, despite his good looks, most girls stayed away from him. Being rejected was one thing, but being insulted? That was something else. Not many could handle that kind of treatment. Takuya was tired of playing dating games with these little girls. He found it easier to reject them outright, leaving no room for hope. Wah! Takuya, that's so mean. The girl ran off, crying, with her face buried in her hands. Kushina was stunned. She had been holding a grudge over being turned down by Takuya, but now, it didn't seem so bad. At least he hadn't called her ugly. For some reason, Kushina felt a wave of relief. Thank goodness. At least I'm not ugly. Wait, what am I even relieved about? He rejected me too. As she remembered her own rejection, Kushina's mood quickly soured again. That evening, when Kushina got home, she asked Nawaki, how do you guys usually turn down a girl's invitation? If you don't like the person, you just politely decline. Why do you ask? Nawaki gave her a curious look. Did you get rejected again? Ow? Nawaki yelped as Tsunade stomped on his foot, causing him to jump in pain. If you can't say anything nice, then keep quiet, Tsunade scolded, pulling Kushina into a hug and pointing at Nawaki. Don't listen to him. He's never even been asked out by a girl, so he has no advice to give. Listen to your big sister instead. Nawaki suddenly felt a different kind of pain. Does my foot even hurt anymore? I think my heart hurts more. He wanted to ask, are you really my sister Nov LB / JNN? Was it that Takuya Yagami kid who rejected you again? Should I go teach him a lesson for turning down our sweet little Kushina? How clueless can he be? It's not like that, Kushina protested, her face turning red. She quickly shook her head. Today, Takuya turned down another classmate. His way of rejecting her was a bit different, so I was just curious. Oh, I see. Sinead rolled her eyes, realizing she had jumped to conclusions. I thought you were upset about getting rejected again, silly girl. So, how did he turn her down? Tell us. Nawaki, whose foot had miraculously stopped hurting, leaned in, eager to hear how a good-looking guy rejects girls. Well. Kushina thought for a moment, then mimicked Takuya's expression and tone. Sorry, but I don't like eating with people who aren't good-looking. What the? Sinead could feel her blood pressure rising. She instinctively raised her hand to rub the back of her neck, trying to calm down. Nawaki was dumbfounded. He had to admit, Takuya's way of turning down girls was unique. Does being handsome mean you can do whatever you want? That's just too much. But then again, maybe being handsome does let you get away with things. Nawaki glanced at Sinead's face and felt a pang of jealousy. How did we come from the same parents? Why is there such a big difference between siblings? It's bad enough that I'm not as good looking as my sister, but I'm also not as talented. Did all the good genes go to her? What are you staring at? Sinead snapped, noticing Nawaki's odd expression. She glared at him, making him flinch and jump to the side to avoid getting hit. Pathetic, Sinead scoffed. Tomorrow, get ready. I'm taking you to see Orochimaru. I don't know what you're thinking, wanting to be his student. Nawaki was nearing graduation and had decided to pull some strings. Sinead was planning to take him to see Orochimaru and seal the deal. Kushina, Sinead said, pulling her close and speaking in a more serious tone. If you trust me, then don't get too close to that Takuya Yagami kid. It won't do either of you any good. Why not? We're just classmates, Kushina replied, confused. Never mind. Sinead shook her head. There was no point in pushing the issue. After all, they really are just classmates right now. It wouldn't be right to warn her about anything more. It's better to let things happen naturally. If they do end up getting closer one day, we'll deal with it then. By then, Kushina might be able to make her own decisions. As the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and with her own growing strength, Kushina would be a force to be reckoned with. The higher-ups would have to think carefully before making any moves. Being a Jinchuriki is a sensitive issue, especially when it involves the Nine Tails, the most powerful of the tailed beasts. If it ever broke free, the consequences would be unimaginable. School, training, and rest, that's what life at the Ninja Academy was like. Boring and repetitive. If Takuya could learn the Shadow Clone Jutsu, he'd send a clone to class in his place. What a waste of my chakra. All this chakra and I can't even use a Shadow Clone to help with school. What a shame. What did you say? Minato looked over at him. Takuya replied without missing a beat, nothing, just saying you're handsome. Your smile is so bright and sunny, like a little sun. You should go by little sun from now on. It suits you. Get out of here. Minato wasn't falling for it. I could say the same for you, silver-haired kid. Why don't you accept that nickname? Because the people calling me that are just kids. Of course, I'm not going to like it, Takuya replied with a shrug. Nice try, but you're not fooling me. No way I'm letting you trick me into that nickname. Sure, Minato might have tolerated being called Little Sun before, but after meeting Takuya, he was completely turned off by the idea. Especially after he learned what the sun could symbolize, Minato decided he never wanted to hear anyone call him that again. By the way, tomorrow's a day off. Want to go on a picnic? I'll handle everything else, you just take care of the grilling. Takuya's cooking was something Minato couldn't get enough of. Whenever he had the chance, he tried to convince Takuya to cook. Sure, Takuya agreed. Nothing else going on, and we can train afterward. Sounds like a good plan. Can I join you guys? A small, pale hand suddenly appeared in front of Takuya and Minato. Takuya looked up, immediately passing the decision to Minato. Chapter 5, Do I Need to Join the Uchiha to Survive? Minato came up with the idea for the picnic. If you want to join, go talk to him. I'm just handling the food, nothing else. Takuya quickly passed the responsibility to Minato, waving at him with a smirk as he bolted away. Wait up. Minato started to chase after him but found himself blocked. Minato, do you think I could join your picnic too? I mean, we're classmates, so you wouldn't say no, right? Kushina smiled sweetly, but her eyes hinted at something much less friendly. Last time, you got away, but if you say no this time, well, you know what'll happen. Do I even have a choice? Minato thought miserably. Takuya, you traitor. No, of course not, Kushina. We're classmates, after all. You're more than welcome to join us. Trust me, Takuya's grilled meat is top-notch. I'll handle the hunting, you just enjoy the food, Minato said, patting his chest in assurance. N/O/bell/B//jn.c//ohm. Awesome. Kushina jumped with excitement. Minato, you're such a nice guy. Don't worry, I won't beat you up. We're classmates, after all. Classmates? You just threatened me. What kind of classmate does that? Minato sighed internally. Well, at least Takuya's doing the grilling. With that thought, Minato felt a bit better about the situation. Kushina skipped home, her spirits high. I'm a Jinchuriki, so I can't just run around wherever I want. I need to think of something. If the picnic spot is too far out, it could be a problem. Her gaze settled on Tsunade. If I can't go alone, why not bring Tsunade along? That would solve everything. Tsunade, I'm going on a picnic with my classmates tomorrow. You should come with us, Kushina said with a grin. No way. Why would I tag along with a bunch of kids? You go have your fun, but leave me out of it, Tsunade replied firmly. She had plans for her rare day off, and they involved sleeping in, not babysitting. Kushina wasn't surprised, she'd expected this. Nawaki, did you know that yesterday Tsunade? Umph. Tsunade's face paled, and she quickly clamped a hand over Kushina's mouth. If Nawaki finds out I gambled away his allowance and lost, he'll never let me hear the end of it. Alright. What do you want? Tsunade gritted her teeth, clearly annoyed. Come to the picnic with me, or I spill the beans to Nawaki. Kushina's eyes sparkled mischievously as she struck her bargain. Ugh. Fine, you win. I'll go, but you're a real piece of work, you know that. Tsunade sighed, defeated. Kushina flashed a victorious grin, making a playful face that only made Tsunade grind her teeth in frustration. I should spank her for this. You're so sneaky. Tsunade muttered. The next morning, Minato burst into Takuya's house, ready to confront him. You totally ditched me yesterday. Come on, don't be mad. You're the sunshine of our group, you can't get angry. The sun's supposed to warm people's hearts, Takuya teased, waving his hand dismissively. Besides, I'm not good at saying no to girls, so I had to leave it to you. Yeah, right. Not good at saying no to girls. Minato thought, rolling his eyes. You've turned down how many girls at school? Every single one without hesitation, and now you say you can't refuse. Yeah, well, I agreed, Minato said, crossing his arms, resigned to his fate. Might as well just go with it. PFFT. Takuya nearly spat out his water. You agreed. Seriously, dude. That's the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. Wherever she goes, Anbu and Root Ninja follow. And you agreed. Well, can't blame him. Minato doesn't know Kushina's secret. Of course I did. You know how scary Kushina can be when she's mad. There's no way I could say no to her, not after seeing her angry. Minato shuddered at the memory of Kushina's fiery red hair floating and her eyes blazing with rage. Yeah, I guess you're right, Takuya conceded. Running into Kushina now would mean getting your butt kicked. Minato sighed, pulling Takuya to his feet as they headed out. Alright, enough shock. I'm not like you and Kushina, with all that chakra. I still don't get how you two are so strong. Let's get moving. We don't want to be late and keep the ladies waiting, right? After buying all the ingredients, the two headed to the school entrance. From a distance, they could already see Kushina's red hair and a blonde woman looking rather impatient. Whoa. Tsunade. She's here too. Am I seeing things? Maybe you should pinch me, Minato muttered, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Ow. Minato yelped as Takuya pinched him hard, making him jump and wince in pain. What the heck? Why so hard? Minato rubbed his sore arm, glaring at Takuya. You asked for a pinch, so I made sure it hurt enough to feel real, Takuya replied with a smirk. But you didn't have to pinch that hard. Minato thought, feeling a mix of annoyance and resignation. Takuya, Minato. Tsunade and Kushina noticed them, and Kushina ran over, waving cheerfully. Tsunade trailed behind, looking utterly uninterested. I'm only here because of Kushina's blackmail. Just act like I'm invisible, Tsunade thought, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Tsunade crossed her arms, and Takuya, noticing her mood, made sure not to stare too long. Better not risk a punch from her. I've heard the stories. He deliberately lagged behind a bit, giving Tsunade her space. Today, I'm with Kushina, so you guys can head back and tell the old man not to bother me, Tsunade ordered the hidden Anbu. Yes, Lady Tsunade, the Anbu replied, not daring to argue with her. If Tsunade was in charge, they were off the hook. They'd just report back to the third Hokage. They arrived at a familiar spot by the river, where they had often gone for picnics. Minato immediately dashed into the woods. Take a break. I'll handle the hunting, Minato called out. Takuya didn't expect Tsunade or Kushina to do any work, so he grabbed a kunai and started chopping firewood. You have Uchiha blood? Tsunade asked directly, not bothering to hide her curiosity from Kushina. Takuya looked up from his fire-making. Yeah. My mom wanted me to go back to the Uchiha clan and even change my last name, but I'm not interested. Why not? Kushina asked, genuinely curious. With your talent, wouldn't joining a big clan mean better training opportunities? Among their peers, Takuya was top of the class, even slightly ahead of Minato. The teachers saw him as a true prodigy, which is why they often turned a blind eye to his daydreaming in class. Good grades came with privileges, after all. I don't really like the Uchiha vibe. Maybe I'm just too stubborn, Takuya said with a self-deprecating smile. And honestly, they didn't really want me there anyway. Why should I beg to join them? Wow, that's some serious backbone, Tsunade thought, her opinion of Takuya rising a notch. If they don't want me, I don't need them. You've got guts, but you're giving up a big opportunity, Tsunade remarked, impressed. Despite herself. They don't want me. Well, I don't want them either. Takuya thought defiantly. Who says I need the Uchiha to survive? Won't it be hard to learn new jutsu? Tsunade asked, knowing that as a non-Uchiha, Takuya would have to rely on mission rewards to learn new techniques unless he found a mentor willing to teach him. I'll manage. Things will work out, Takuya replied confidently. If I can't make it with all the cheats I've got, then nobody else has a chance. The Uchiha. Who needs them? They're just a clan that's slowly getting pushed into a corner by the higher-ups. Don't worry, Danzo and the third Hokage will get to you soon enough. Just wait. I'm back. A short while later, Minato returned with 2 rabbits and a small boar, tossing them on the ground before flopping down to rest. His part was done. Takuya set to work with his kunai, preparing the meat, and soon the smell of roasting meat filled the air by the river. Kushina's eyes lit up, and she looked at Takuya like he was a treasure. Even Tsunade, who had been grumbling about coming along, started to look forward to the picnic. She was also starting to take more interest in Takuya himself. Chapter 6, Kushina's plea, and Tsunade's price hike. Tsunade's idea, huh? At the Hokage's office, the Anbu had just delivered Tsunade's message. The third Hokage waved his hand dismissively. If Tsunade's with them, it should be fine. She'll make sure nothing happens. You can all take the day off. Yes, sir. The Anbu ninjas were thrilled to have a rare day off. Following the Jinchuriki around every day was exhausting, even for ninjas. No one could keep up that pace forever, even shinobi needed rest. The Anbu had barely left when the office door swung open without so much as a knock, something that made the third Hokage frown in annoyance. But when he saw who it was, he swallowed his irritation. Danzo, what do you want? The third asked, not even looking up from the paperwork on his desk. As the Hokage, he was the most powerful man in the village and also the busiest. The idea that being Hokage was easy couldn't be further from the truth. The endless stream of tasks left him with barely any personal time. Why did you pull the guards away from the Jinchuriki? Danzo demanded. Because Tsunade is with Kushina. With her there, what's there to worry about? The third Hokage knew exactly what Danzo was getting at. The third raised his gaze to meet Danzo's. We made a promise to Lady Maito to take care of Kushina. Don't forget what you agreed to. So what? If it benefits the village, why should a promise matter? Danzo scoffed, completely unfazed. In his mind, everything he did was for the good of Konoha. To Danzo, a Jinchuriki like Kushina should be under strict control by Root, not roaming free, going to school, getting into fights, or even going on picnics to eat grilled meat. How irresponsible. Just as I expected, thought the third Hokage, shaking his head. He ignored Danzo and returned to his work. There was no way he would let Danzo control the Jinchuriki. Danzo might be shameless, but the Hokage couldn't afford to be. Besides, the third Hokage didn't trust Root. If they tried to control Kushina and lost their grip, or worse, unleashed the Nine Tails, that would be the end of Konoha. Realizing his proposal had once again been rejected, Danzo huffed in frustration and turned to leave. Meanwhile, Kushina had no idea that Danzo was obsessing over her. She was too busy enjoying the grilled meat, savoring every bite. Even Tsunade, who'd claimed she wasn't interested, was digging in with gusto, eating more than anyone else. Minato watched the two of them eat like they were in an eating contest, smiling nervously as sweat beaded on his forehead. This food might not be enough. Do we have enough seasonings? You think? They're eating like there's no tomorrow. Takuya's eyes widened as he quickly joined the food battle, while Minato, not wanting to be left out, started grabbing food too. The small wild boar and 2 rabbits they had caught were soon devoured by the 4 of them. Tsunade patted her belly in satisfaction. You're a pretty good cook, kid. No wonder Kushina insisted on dragging me along for this. Burp. She let out a satisfied burp, to which Takuya responded with a modest nod, acknowledging the compliment without saying much more. The last thing I need is more people showing up for free meals. Cooking for a crowd is a hassle. Kushina, Lady Tsunade, Minato and I are heading out to train. If you two get bored, feel free to head back, Takuya said after they had rested for a bit. He and Minato exchanged a look and then disappeared into the woods, leaving no room for Kushina to follow. Kushina felt a pang of disappointment. She'd wanted to join them, but neither of them had invited her, and she wasn't about to impose. Ninjas don't like having their training watched. It could reveal too much about their abilities. Unless, of course, they're really close. But it was clear that Takuya and Minato didn't see her as a close friend yet. You're going to end up heartbroken, you know, Tsunade said, seeing Kushina's downcast expression, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. What? Heartbroken by who? Kushina blinked, confused. Tsunade sighed, leaning lazily against a tree. Oh, nothing. Just remembering some old memories. I'm going to take a nap. Try not to disturb me and keep working on controlling your chakra. Don't let that thing mess with you. With the 9 tails sealed inside her, Kushina had to constantly fight against its influence, especially since the 9 tails was always trying to corrode the seal with its chakra, disrupting her training. Like Naruto in the future, Kushina was struggling with basic jutsu, especially the simplest ones like the transformation jutsu. And /o/bel/b/jn.c//ohm. Kushina's expression turned serious as she nodded determinedly. I won't let that big fox beat me. I'll defeat it. Hey, Tsunade, can I trade some jutsu with you? She suddenly asked. Jutsu? Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Doesn't the Uzumaki clan have enough jutsu? The Uzumaki's collection of sealing techniques alone was enough to make anyone's head spin. Wait a second, you're not planning to get jutsu for that kid Takuya, are you? I just want to thank him, Kushina said, clinging to Tsunade's arm and giving her the best puppy dog eyes she could muster. Please, Tsunade. I just need a shadow clone jutsu scroll. She'd overheard Takuya once complaining to Minato that if he could use shadow clones, he'd be able to improve his training much faster. Kushina had remembered that and now wanted to get him the scroll as a gift. No way, Tsunade flatly refused. It's only been a little while, and you're already trying to go out of your way for him. What's next? Absolutely not. I'm against this, period. 20,000 ryo. When the pleading didn't work, Kushina puffed up her cheeks, holding up 2 fingers. If you still say no, I'll just go to Uncle Hokage. He promised I could ask him for any jutsu I wanted. Hold on. Tsunade quickly grabbed Kushina's hand, putting on a serious face. You can't bother the old man with something like this. He's got enough on his plate. No, I'll take care of it for you. Tell you what, give me 40,000 ryo, and I'll teach him myself. After all, just handing him a jutsu scroll doesn't mean he'll learn it right. He needs proper instruction, don't you think? Tsunade nudged Kushina with her elbow, starting to haggle. Besides, that kid's got too much pride. If you just give him the scroll, he might not even accept it. But if I say I'm teaching him as a favor for the barbecue, it makes sense, right? 40,000 ryo, it's a fair deal. Well, that makes sense, but Kushina felt something was off. Even if I have money, isn't she just scamming me? Sure, I'm young, but I'm not stupid. Tsunade wasn't sure exactly how much money Kushina had, but she knew that the village had inherited the Uzumaki clan's wealth, including a whole commercial street that was now all Kushina's property, shops, land, and everything. Chapter 7, Are you underestimating the pride of the Uchiha? Tsunade could say with absolute confidence. In Konoha, there aren't many people wealthier than our little rich girl, Kushina. Stop hesitating. This is a one-time offer. If you don't take it, you can go ask the old man. But think about how he'll react when he finds out your situation is way too delicate. But Kushina was completely caught in Tsunade's web. She thought about it for a long time but still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, though she couldn't put her finger on it. Fine, but you better teach him properly. I'll give you the 40,000 ryo only if he actually learns it. Otherwise, no deal. Don't worry, it's in good hands, Tsunade said, patting her not yet impressive chest with confidence. With Takuya's stellar grades, teaching him should be easy, right? Hopefully, he wouldn't be like that blockhead Nawaki, who nearly drove her insane. As long as money was involved, Tsunade was all about helping out. She wished for more deals like this. She'd never have to worry about gambling funds again. Whoosh. 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 Several kunai whizzed through the air as Minato launched himself at Takuya, who was perched on a tree branch. Clang. 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 With lightning-fast reflexes, Takuya deflected the incoming kunai and aimed a kick at Minato. Bang. There was a soft explosion as Minato's body turned into a log, a substitution jutsu. Ah. Got you. What the minus? Minato's real body had looped around from another angle, thinking his plan had worked, only to be met with Takuya's fist. With a grunt, Minato was sent flying, crashing into a tree and sliding down its trunk. Hiss. Minato sucked in a breath, rubbing his chest. Takuya, we're just training. Do you have to go that hard? And how did you figure out I used a clone? That half-baked clone technique was obvious, Takuya said as he jumped down from the tree, pulling Minato back to his feet. With a teasing grin, he added, trying to fool me with that. You've got a lot to learn, kid. I'm done. Every time, it's the same. Minato huffed, frustration written all over his face. That smug grin. I really want to punch it, but I just can't beat him. It's hopeless. Minato decided to throw in the towel. He felt like Takuya had him completely figured out. No matter what strategies or attacks he used, Takuya always countered them with ease. What's the point of training if I'm just a punching bag? Alright. Takuya nodded, not pressing the issue. After all, it was always Minato who suggested these sparring sessions, even though he was the one getting beaten every time. Still, after a bit of time had passed, Minato would always forget the pain and challenge him again. The two went back to their own training routines. As he watched Takuya practicing his swordsmanship, Minato couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Takuya, you're practicing Uchiha sword techniques. Won't the Uchiha have a problem with that? And /o/bell/b/in.c//ohm. A problem? Why would they? Takuya looked at him, puzzled. My mother taught me swordsmanship, and some of the jutsu scrolls were left by my parents. It's not like I stole them from the Uchiha shrine. Why would they care? Are you underestimating the pride of the Uchiha? Minato asked, incredulous. Forget I said anything. The Uchiha really are a bunch of prideful maniacs. Want to learn? I can teach you. No thanks. Minato was tempted, but he wasn't a Uchiha. The last thing he wanted was to stir up trouble. Takuya's skills were inherited from his parents, and he did have Uchiha blood, but Minato had nothing like that. Better not to create problems for himself. Before becoming Drea's student, life hadn't been easy for Minato. Despite his talent, He had no access to advanced jutsu or resources. Like other civilian ninjas, all he could do was grind through the basics and endlessly practice the jutsu taught at the academy. That's enough for today. Let's head back. We can't keep them waiting too long, Takuya said, referring to Kushina and Tsunade. Without them, Takuya and Minato would have trained until dark. Yeah. Minato wiped the sweat from his brow, gathering up his undamaged tools while reluctantly discarding the ones that had broken. The high cost of ninja gear made Minato, who relied on a pension to get by, scrimp and save wherever he could. Back in the village, the group dispersed, each heading home. When Takuya arrived at his doorstep, he found someone waiting. A certain someone he'd just parted ways with not long ago. Is there something you need, Lady Tsunade? Not bad, Tsunade remarked, eyeing the groceries in Takuya's hands with amusement. What's the matter? You're not going to invite me in. Takuya silently opened the door. Tsunade didn't hesitate, following Takuya into his modest home. She glanced around, taking shabby space. Takuya couldn't tell what she was thinking as she nodded. In the sma. To herself now and then, leaving him completely baffled. He made a cup of tea and set it on the table, tentatively asking, "Are you staying for dinner?" "Don't mind if I do." Tsunade plopped down on the straw mat like she owned the place, leisurely sipping her tea. She looked less like a guest and more like a landlord inspecting her property. Takuya had no idea what Tsunade was doing at his house. Was it about Kushina? Did she want to tell him to stay away from her? That didn't seem likely. Takuya hadn't been actively seeking out Kushina, so there was no reason for Tsunade to go out of her way to confront him. Whatever. If she has something to say, she'll say it. If not, no big deal. Shrugging, Takuya headed into the kitchen to start dinner. It was still a bit early, but he figured the sooner he fed Tsunade, the sooner he could send her on her way. This is good. As soon as the meal was ready, Tsunade dug in with gusto, her table manners doing little to match the refined image of Lady Tsunade. Watching her eat like that made Takuya's eye twitch slightly. He only took a few bites before putting his chopsticks down, observing Tsunade as she devoured her food. I'm usually too busy, and Nawaki's cooking is terrible. As for Kushina, never mind. Tsunade grumbled between mouthfuls, complaining about Nawaki's poor cooking skills. If Nawaki heard this, he'd probably hide in the bathroom and cry. Shouldn't you, as the elder sister, be doing the cooking? It's not like you're lazy or anything, right? Seeing that Tsunade was nearly done, Takuya finally asked, "So, is there a reason you came to see me?" "Take a guess. If you guess right, I'll give you a reward," Tsunade said, setting down her bowl and chopsticks with a satisfied burp. She hadn't enjoyed a meal this much in a long time, though she worried that eating like this too often might make her gain weight. Looking down at her still not so large chest, she sighed in relief. Even if I gain a little weight, at least Drea won't have any more excuses to call me flat. Stupid Drea. Next time, I'll knock that smirk off his face. Unaware of Tsunade's inner monologue, Takuya just shook his head. Guess. You think I'm going to play that game with you? Not happening. If you've got something to say, just say it. When Takuya didn't press her further and instead started clearing the table, Tsunade felt a bit frustrated. Kids these days are hard to fool. Hey. Aren't you afraid I'm here to warn you to stay away from Kushina? She called out. As he set the dishes in the sink and ran the water, Takuya replied without turning around, I doubt that. My relationship with Kushina is just that of classmates, nothing that would warrant such a big fuss from you. This kid really isn't easy to trick, Tsunade thought, propping her chin on her hand. Takuya, since I've eaten 2 meals at your place today, I'm going to give you a reward. Interested? A reward? You've got to be kidding me. Takuya glanced back at Tsunade, paused for a moment, and then said, No thanks. If having 2 meals means I have to accept a reward, I'd rather not. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Even if it does fall into your lap, it's likely a trap. The best way to avoid getting caught is to steer clear of these so-called rewards. Can we even have a normal conversation? Tsunade was grinding her teeth, resisting the urge to punch something. Nawaki was never this difficult. Strangely, Tsunade found herself missing her simple-minded little brother. No way. You're taking this reward whether you like it or not. If you don't take the reward, how am I supposed to get my 40,000 ryo? Chapter 8, Tsunade, you definitely got paid, didn't you? Kushina wasn't easy to fool. If she figured out she'd been tricked and complained to the third Hokage, Tsunade would definitely get an earful. And if there's one thing Tsunade couldn't stand, it was someone nagging at her .n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. This is Kushina's doing, isn't it? If Takuya had only suspected it before, the moment Tsunade pulled out a jutsu scroll, he was sure. Tsunade didn't just hand out rewards for sharing a meal. The only explanation was that Kushina had asked her to do it, probably slipping some cash into the deal as well. How did this brat figure it out? Tsunade's eyes widened in disbelief. Is he reading my mind? She hadn't mentioned Kushina at all, and yet Takuya had guessed it so quickly. Kids these days sure are sharp. Why isn't my little brother this clever? After washing the dishes and drying his hands, Takuya walked out of the kitchen. He glanced at the scroll on the table, then looked up at Tsunade with a calm expression. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Takuya suddenly asked, "How much did Kushina pay you to slip me that jutsu scroll?" "What?" Tsunade nearly jumped out of her skin, hastily denying it. "Nonsense. There's no such thing. If that's the case, you can take the scroll back." "I won't be accepting it," Takuya said, handing the scroll back to her and gently pushing her toward the door. She definitely got paid. No way Tsunade would be this generous without a reason. Takuya thought. There's no such thing as free lunch in this world. Right now, Takuya and Tsunade were barely more than acquaintances. The only reason Tsunade would go out of her way like this was money. This kid's got some serious strength, Tsunade thought as she realized she was almost out the door. Sighing, she gave in. Fine, stop pushing. It was Kushina's idea. She said you really wanted to learn the shadow clone jutsu, so she asked me to bring you the scroll. She paid me 40,000 ryo. Happy now? Kushina. Takuya wasn't sure what to say. He never imagined she'd go so far as to buy a jutsu scroll for him. We're not that close, are we? Sure, he wanted to learn the shadow clone jutsu, but not like this. Please take it back and let Kushina know that we're just classmates. We're not close enough for her to be giving me jutsu scrolls, Takuya said firmly. Seriously, kid. You're gonna turn down something like this? Tsunade couldn't believe it. Who says no to free stuff? Especially when it's a powerful jutsu like this one. Look, I don't want to make things more complicated for myself, Takuya said, deciding to be upfront. Maybe it's my background, or maybe it's Kushina's status, but every time she approaches me, I can't help but notice someone watching. I hope it's just my imagination, but I think you can understand why I'm cautious. Well, this is unexpected, Tsunade thought, taken aback. He even noticed the Anbu tailing him. This kid's sharper than I thought. I get it. I'll pass on your message to Kushina. And as for those people watching you. Tsunade paused at the door, then added, as long as you don't do anything against the village's interests, they won't bother you. Yeah, right. Takuya thought. The third Hokage is a sly old fox. He loves to play the kindly old man while working his schemes in the shadows. And let's not even start with Danzo, he's the reason Konoha's got so much darkness to begin with. Bang. The door to the Hokage's office swung open with a loud crash. Old man, we need to talk, Tsunade announced as she barged in. Ah, Tsunade. Did you get Kushina back home safely? The third Hokage asked, putting down the documents he'd been reading. Cut the crap, old man. Don't pretend you don't know, Tsunade snapped. As soon as we got back, the Anbu were on her tail again. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The third Hokage cleared his throat awkwardly. Alright. What's on your mind? It's simple. Kushina might be the new Nine Tails Jinchuriki, but she's still a kid. She's still in school. She needs friends, and normal interactions with her classmates. You're watching her too closely, Tsunade said seriously. I'm doing this for the good of the village, Tsunade. You know how important the Jinchuriki is to us? The third Hokage replied, knowing exactly what she was referring to. He had personally arranged for everyone who got close to Kushina to be thoroughly investigated. Tsunade frowned, her tone firm. I know you want to protect the village, and I know the Jinchuriki is vital, but you can't let that interfere with the lives of other kids. Oh, and by the way, those two brats, Takuya Yagami and Minato Namikaze, they worth investing in. Tsunade placed the scroll on the Hokage's desk, intending for him to pass it on to Takuya, with Minato included for good measure. Now Takuya can't refuse it. It's a gift from the village, a sign they see potential in him. Takuya Yagami and Minato Namikaze. The third Hokage mused, recalling the two promising students who had been on his radar for their close connection with Kushina. Minato was a straightforward case and exceptionally talented student from a civilian background, exactly the kind of kid the village liked to nurture. But Takuya, he had Uchiha blood and that complicated things. I'll think about it, the third Hokage finally said after a moment of reflection. Tsunade nodded, then waved her hand dismissively as she walked out. I'll leave you to it. Don't work too late. Get some rest. As soon as she left, the third Hokage ordered, look into Takuya Yagami's connection to the Uchiha clan. Yes, Lord Hokage, an Anbu operative appeared, acknowledged the command, and vanished as quickly as he'd come. Back at home, Tsunade hugged Kushina, ruffling her bright red hair as she grumbled, "You little fox, that kid totally guessed why I went to see him." Kushina was stunned. Ignoring her messy hair, she asked nervously, "What do we do now? Did Takuya accept the jutsu scroll?" "It's not like that," Tsunade sighed, collapsing onto the sofa and kicking her feet up in frustration. "He refused it. He figured out you were trying to give it to him and said that if you keep it up, he might cut ties with you. He also knows he's being watched by the Anbu." "Man, that kid's got sharp instincts for someone his age," Tsunade muttered to herself. "Why did he have to have Uchiha blood? That just makes everything more complicated." Kushina twisted her fingers in her shirt, anxiety clear on her face. She was worried Takuya might start avoiding her, and she didn't know what she'd do if that happened. "Silly girl," Tsunade said softly, pulling Kushina into a comforting hug. "I've already given the scroll to the old man. He'll make sure it gets to Takuya and Minato eventually. That way, Takuya won't have any reason to refuse. Isn't that what you wanted?" "I guess so." Kushina managed a weak smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You're in trouble now, girl," Tsunade thought, watching Kushina. She could only hope that Kushina and Takuya's relationship wouldn't get any closer. With Kushina's strong-willed personality, she might end up wrapped around Takuya's finger if she wasn't careful. Later that day, while practicing hand seals at home, Takuya heard a knock at the door. He quickly slipped on his shoes and went to answer it. "Mikoto." His eyes lit up as he recognized the visitor. "Did you miss me?" Uchiha Mikoto teased, pinching his cheek with one hand while holding a bento box in the other. "I've been really busy with graduation coming up, so I haven't had time to visit." "You're not mad at me, are you?" she asked with a smile. Though Takuya hadn't returned to the Uchiha clan, his late mother had been close friends with Mikoto. As a result, Mikoto had always looked out for him, often bringing him food and checking in on him. Chapter 9, I skip a grade, you repeat a year, we graduate together. No way. Come on in, Mikoto, and stop pinching my cheeks. Alright, I'll remember that for next time, Uchiha Mikoto teased, mimicking Takuya's tone, which earned her an eye roll from him. As she stepped into the living room, Mikoto opened the lunchbox she had brought and laid out some snacks she had made. Takuya immediately grabbed a piece and started eating. Mikoto sat beside him, resting her chin on her hand, watching him with a soft smile. Between bites, Takuya asked casually, "How's the preparation for graduation going?" "It's alright, I guess," Mikoto replied, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "I've been thinking about whether I should join the police force." The Uchiha clan members had two main paths after graduation. They could either follow the village's standard procedure, join a team with other graduates under a Jonin's guidance, or they could go straight into the Uchiha police force. Joining the police force meant top-tier training, and learning from the strongest within the clan, especially when it came to the Sharingan. But it also meant dealing with the less glamorous side of ninja life law enforcement, which often drew resentment from other villagers. "I'd suggest going with the village's team assignment first," Takuya advised between mouthfuls. "Get some experience, and then, if you still want to, join the police force later. Even though the Ukwa's training is better suited for you, the police force isn't exactly the best environment for a fresh graduate," Takuya added, knowing her gentle nature wasn't cut out for the rough work the police force demanded. Mikoto sighed, her expression conflicted. "You're right. I'm not really the type for that kind of work." The thought of spending her days dealing with troublemakers, enforcing laws, and constantly facing the villagers' mistrust made Mikoto's face scrunch up in distaste. "But it's too bad you're only in your second year. It'd be great if we could graduate together and be on the same team," Mikoto joked with a soft laugh. Maybe I should graduate early then. Takuya mused, half seriously. The graduation exams were a breeze for him, he could pass them with his eyes closed. He had been reluctant to leave school early, not wanting to end up like Kakashi, bouncing between teams. But the idea of being on a team with Mikoto wasn't so bad. Do you really think the third Hokage would let that happen? Mikoto replied, raising an eyebrow, her tone a mix of concern and disbelief. Alright, enough talk. Finish eating and go wash up, then get some rest, she said, trying to steer the conversation away from his wild ideas. I'm serious, Mikoto, Takuya insisted. I've already learned everything the teachers can offer. Staying in school is just wasting time. If you don't have a good team lined up, I might as well graduate early and join you. Wait, what? Mikoto's eyes widened in shock. Was he really considering this? She had just been joking, but Takuya was taking it to heart. But even if you graduate early, there's no guarantee the village will put us on the same team. Mikoto tried to reason with him, her voice tinged with panic. What if something went wrong? How could she face his late mother? But the more she tried to dissuade him, the more determined Takuya became. Once the idea took root in his mind, it was hard to shake it off. Then we can form our own team. The village has plenty of two-man squads, Takuya suggested, his tone calm but resolute. That's too dangerous. Two newly graduated kids. Mikoto began, but her voice trailed off as she saw Takuya activate his Sharingan, the two tomo in each eye spinning slowly. Do you really think I need to stay in the academy, wasting time? Takuya asked, pointing to his eyes. To the Uchiha, a two-tomo Sharingan meant a significant power boost. Most ninjas with that level of Sharingan could easily take on Chunin-level opponents. You've awakened your Sharingan. Mikoto gasped, leaning forward to get a better look at his eyes. She was both surprised and thrilled, unable to hide her excitement. Yeah, I awakened it last year. Just hit the two-tomo stage today. Who knows? By next year, I might hit 3, Takuya shrugged casually. Stop joking around, Mikoto scolded, though she couldn't hide the pride in her voice. Maybe I should tell the elders and have you return to the clan. With your Sharingan, they'd definitely welcome you back. So what if I've got silver hair? It doesn't change the fact that you're an Uchiha. Now that your Sharingan is awakened, they'll be eager to have you back, she suggested, the thought of bringing him back into the fold lifting her spirits. No way, Takuya shot back instantly. I still remember how those old geezers treated me back then. I'm not going back to the Uchiha. He paused, his expression softening. But if you think I wouldn't make a good teammate, I'll find another team. This is crazy. Mikoto thought, anxiety bubbling up inside her. If Takuya really did graduate early, even with his abilities, the ninja world was still too harsh for someone his age. Takuya, I know how stubborn you are once you've made up your mind, but can't you wait just one more year? Just 1 year, okay. Mikoto pleaded, trying to find a middle ground. Takuya considered her words for a moment before a mischievous grin spread across his face. Alright, how about this? I skip a grade, you stay back a year, and then we'll be in the same class and graduate together. Nov LB / JNN. If you don't agree, I'll go ahead and graduate early, he teased. With his grades and skills, not only could he skip a grade, but he could probably ace the Chunin exams too. Skipping ahead would put him right in Mikoto's class if she agreed to stay back, of course. No way, Mikoto shook her head firmly. The teachers would never allow it. My grades are too good. They wouldn't just let me stay back. If they don't agree, I'll just beat up their kids. Takuya declared, slamming the table for emphasis. PFFT. Mikoto couldn't help but laugh at his ridiculous threat. She knew he was just kidding. Takuya would never actually do something like that. You're laughing at me? Takuya asked, feigning hurt as he got up and headed toward his bedroom. Mikoto blinked, confused. Takuya, what are you looking for? Chapter 10. So the one he likes is Uchiha Mikoto. I found the pajamas you left last time, Takuya said casually. If you don't agree to repeat the year, then you'll have to stay at my place from now on. After all, you did promise that when we grew up, you'd marry me. You can't break your promise now. You still remember that childhood promise. And you're actually serious about it. If you walk out of this living room, I'll show up at your classroom tomorrow and tell everyone I'm here to pick up my wife. Mikoto Uchiha, who had been trying to sneak out, froze. She was caught, and on top of that, Takuya was threatening her. If he really shows up at school saying I'm his wife, I'll never live it down. You win this time. She glanced at Takuya, who stood by the door with a smug grin, holding out her pajamas. Mikoto's face turned red as she snatched the pajamas and marched toward the bathroom. Fine, I'll stay. It's not like it's my first time here anyway. My little brother's all grown up and even started threatening me. What am I going to do? Mikoto spent the whole night tossing and turning, unable to find a solution. Jumping a grade, huh? Takuya mentioned to Mikoto the next morning on their way to the Ninja Academy.n/o/vel/b/jn.c//ohm. Mikoto. As soon as they stepped outside, they ran into Minato, who greeted Mikoto with his usual bright smile. Mikoto, you seem a bit distracted today. What's on your mind? Just stressing over the idea of repeating the year, Mikoto replied, picking up her pace, trying to ignore Takuya's amused expression. Repeating. Minato's voice was full of surprise. He could hardly believe his ears. Mikoto Uchiha was known for being a top student, brilliant and beautiful, with countless admirers. If someone like her wanted to repeat a year, what hope did the other students have of graduating on time? But why? Minato scratched his head, completely at a loss. Convincing the teachers wouldn't be easy, they'd probably be furious. Because of me, Takuya stated plainly. Minato, I'm planning to jump a grade so I can graduate with Mikoto. That way, we'll be assigned to the same team. I'm going to request the exam as soon as we get to school. Minato. Are you just planning to leave me behind? Mikoto wants to repeat the year, and Takuya wants to jump ahead just so they can be in the same class and graduate together. And what about me? Are you just going to leave me here? No way, I'm jumping a grade too. Minato made up his mind. He'd already learned everything he needed. Jumping a grade wouldn't be a big deal. Even if he wasn't quite on Takuya's level, Minato's grades were good enough to pass the early graduation exam. Jumping a grade was totally doable, just routine. Little did Takuya know, he'd inadvertently influenced Minato's decision. As soon as they arrived at the academy, Takuya headed straight to the teacher's office to inform Mr. Uemura that he wanted to take the advancement exam. Sensei, I'd like to take the advancement exam too. Minato quickly added. Mr. Uemura looked at the two of them, completely baffled. Are these two just here to mess with me? Jumping grades together, really? Sensei, I'd like to request to repeat the year and not participate in today's graduation exam, Mikoto Uchiha said as she walked into the senior teacher's office. She hesitated for a long time, but in the end, she couldn't risk Takuya showing up at her classroom door and calling her his wife. The Ninja Academy quickly became a whirlwind of confusion. Takuya and Minato wanted to jump grades, while Mikoto Uchiha wanted to repeat the year. What on earth is going on? In the end, the three of them were brought into an empty classroom, and the other teachers, who hadn't started class yet, gathered to watch the drama unfold. Alright, what's going on with you three? Mr. Uemura and the senior class teacher, Mr. Onoyama, both rubbed their temples, feeling a headache coming on. The two teachers exchanged bewildered and frustrated looks. I want to jump a grade so I can be in the same class as Mikoto, Takuya declared confidently, raising his hand. This is bad. I've got a bad feeling about this. Mikoto thought as she covered her face. Why do you want to jump a grade? One of the teachers asked. Because too many people are after her, Takuya replied. What does that have to do with you? Do you want to jump a grade just because other people are interested in her? Seriously. Minato was equally stunned. So why am I doing this? Just for fun. Mikoto promised me that when we grew up, she'd marry me. But she's too amazing, I am worried she'll slip away, so I have to jump a grade to stay close to her. PFFT cough, cough. The room erupted in a chorus of surprised coughs and sputters. Mikoto's face turned beet red as she stomped on Takuya's foot, unable to look up. Kids these days, already talking about marriage. Or are we just getting old? Several teachers looked like they were questioning their life choices. They were all still single, while their young students were already planning their futures with a spouse. This is so unfair. Minato, why do you want to jump a grade? Mr. Uemura asked, his expression stern as he turned to a nervous-looking Minato. Minato was near tears. Can I just say I'm here for the ride? Sensei, I find the lower grade classes too boring. I want to challenge myself with something harder, Minato explained, trying to sound confident. Are you sure you want to do this? Mr. Waymura felt like he needed some heart medication. His blood pressure was definitely rising. If two of his best students jumped grades, there went his bonus. And you, Mikoto. You really want to repeat the year. The senior teacher was hoping Mikoto would back out of this craziness. Sensei, I still have a lot to work on, so I'd like to request to repeat the year, Mikoto explained politely, even though she was seething inside and wanted to smack Takuya. The news of these three decisions quickly spread throughout the school. When Kushina heard about it, she was completely stunned. Takuya is jumping a grade. Minato too. So the one he likes is Uchiha Mikoto. For some reason, that thought made Kushina feel not so great. As she listened to the chatter around her, she imagined what would happen next. Once Takuya and Minato jumped a grade, she'd be left all alone. I don't want to be left behind. Kushina bolted from her seat and ran toward the teacher's office. There goes my bonus. Mr. Waymura clutched his chest, his heart aching. Sensei, I want to take the advancement exam too. Kushina burst into the office. Determined. The teacher stared at her, speechless. Chapter 11, Third Hokage and Danzo clash. For Takuya, the skip grade exam was a walk in the park, more like a game than a challenge. Even Minato had an easy time with it. Both of them passed and successfully skipped a grade, though Minato seemed a bit confused about why he even did it. After everything was over, Minato ran a hand through his blonde hair, thinking, what did I just do? He had rushed into taking the exam on a whim. Takuya did it for that girl, Mikoto, but what was my reason? Was it just to play third wheel? The ripple effect of their decisions wasn't small. Even the third Hokage took notice. While Takuya and Minato's decision to skip a grade made sense and was within the rules, the teachers couldn't stop them as long as they passed the test. Mikoto Uku's decision to stay behind was also understandable if she truly didn't want to graduate. The teachers had no choice but to approve it. But Kushina's case was different. Her status was too sensitive. Reluctantly, their teacher, Waymura Ichiki, had to bring the matter to the third Hokage. How to handle it was up to him. It wasn't something a simple teacher should worry about. Kushina, why do you want to skip a grade? The third Hokage asked her in his office. You've only been in the second grade for a couple of months. Isn't it a bit early for you? Uncle Hokage, my friends have already applied for the exam and passed. They'll be in the upper grade starting tomorrow, and I don't want to be left behind, Kushina replied, looking up at him with a sad expression. Her clan had been wiped out. Her people were either dead or scattered. She was the only one who came to Konoha and became the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Everywhere she went, she was under surveillance. Now, after finally making friends with Takuya and Minato, they both applied for the exam and moved up a grade. It felt like she was back at square one alone and isolated, just like when she first arrived in Konoha. Every Jinchuriki experiences loneliness, except for Mito Uzumaki. No one dared to cross her, not even the Hokage. But there was only one Mito Uzumaki, and Kushina wasn't her child. The third Hokage stood up from his chair, walked over, and knelt beside Kushina, placing his hands on her shoulders. You've come to Konoha, made friends, and found people you care about. That makes Uncle Hokage very happy. Integrating Jinchuriki into Konoha and giving them a sense of belonging was crucial. That's why the third Hokage had always opposed Danzo's proposals. He believed that strict control over the Jinchuriki wasn't the best solution. It was a contradiction wanting the Jinchuriki to feel like they belonged in Konoha while also placing numerous restrictions on them. That was the third Hokage's classic double standard. So, Uncle Hokage, does that mean you'll let me skip a grade? Kushina asked hopefully. The smile on the third Hokage's face stiffened a bit, and he gave a wry smile. But if you skip a grade, your studies might fall behind, and catching up will make you very busy. You might not have much time to spend with your friends. I'm not afraid. Kushina shook her head firmly. As long as she could skip a grade and be in the same class as Takuya and Minato, she didn't care how much harder she'd have to work. Nov/LB //JNN. Alright, I'll allow it. The third Hokage sighed, relenting. Thank you, Uncle Hokage. Kushina beamed and practically skipped out of the office. As soon as she left, the third Hokage rubbed his temples, bracing himself for a visit from an old friend. Sarutobi. Sure enough, within moments, Danzo's voice echoed through the office, just as forceful as ever. If there was even the slightest disturbance in the village, Danzo was always the first to hear about. Iden would storm into the Hokage's office. I've told you time and again, you can't be too lenient with the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, Danzo insisted. Danzo, the third Hokage responded, looking up at him, a Jinchuriki is still a person. If we want her to integrate into Konoha and see it as her home, she needs to form bonds here. You should understand that. Fee. Danzo scoffed at the idea of bonds. Jinchuriki need to be controlled, Sarutobi. Are you getting soft? Letting the Jinchuriki run around with those kids is reckless. The third Hokage's expression hardened. Danzo, I'm the Hokage. I will decide how to handle the Jinchuriki. Your concern is unnecessary. Danzo's breath caught, and for a moment, he was speechless, silenced by the third Hokage's reminder of who held the title of Hokage. Just don't regret this decision, Danzo muttered before turning and leaving the office with a scowl. The third Hokage raised an eyebrow, unbothered. As long as Danzo couldn't get his way here, he wouldn't dare to act on his own. At this point, the third Hokage still had the upper hand, and Danzo's influence wasn't strong enough to overreach. This balance would last until after the Third Ninja War. Post-war, Danzo became increasingly brazen, eventually behaving like a man unhinged. Are you out of your mind? Tsunade couldn't believe it. She felt an overwhelming urge to knock some sense into Kushina. Takuya and Minato had reasons to apply for the skip grade exam, but why on earth would you follow along? Are your grades even up to par? Seems like she's lost it, Nawaki chimed in, arms crossed, nodding in agreement. Uchiha Mikoto staying back was already a shock to everyone. That Takuya Yagami kid is a total nutcase. Kushina, you should keep your distance. Mikoto Uchiha was the girl everyone was lining up to chase after, and yet she stayed back a grade because of Takuya Yagami. It was absurd. Just because she promised to marry him when they were kids, she had to go along with his antics. Why isn't there a girl like Mikoto pretty, sweet, and gentle who wants to marry me? Jealousy is tearing me apart. Ah, it's so frustrating. Get lost. Tsunade shot a glare at her brother. Why are you getting involved in Kushina's business? Are you really one to talk? If it wasn't for me pulling strings with Orochimaru, would he have taken you on as his student? Sis. Can we not bring that up? The grandson of the first Hokage, Nawaki's goal was to become a strong ninja like his grandfather and eventually become Hokage. Pulling strings was embarrassing enough, and now Tsunade was rubbing it in his face. I've got my pride, you know. But Nawaki desperately wanted to be Orochimaru's student, so he had begged Tsunade to help him out. With her assistance, Orochimaru had slightly lowered the difficulty of the exam, just enough for Nawaki to pass and become his disciple. Shoo, shoo. Adults are talking, no need for a kid like you to chime in, Tsunade dismissed him with a wave, sending Nawaki off. Once Nawaki was gone, Tsunade turned to Kushina with a serious look. Kushina, do you like Takuya Yagami? Chapter 12, Kurama senses a kindred spirit. Kushina froze for a moment, then her face flushed as she complained, what? No way. Takuya and Minato are just my classmates, my friends. I just don't want to lose the only two friends I've made because of this whole skipping grades thing. Kushina, who had lost everything and had to start over, was extremely sensitive deep down. She desperately wanted to be accepted and have her own close friends. As for love, that wasn't even on her radar. Sure, Takuya's teasing of Mikoto Uchiha annoyed her a bit, but what did that have to do with love? Alright, if that's how you feel, then go for it. I've got your back, Tsunade said with a sigh. The third Hokage had already approved it. What could Tsunade do? Forbid Kushina from skipping grades. That would break the poor girl's heart. Yeah, you're the best, Tsunade. How about I make you something to eat? You probably haven't had breakfast yet. Kushina cheered, practically bouncing with excitement. Tsunade gave a cold laugh. Don't bother. Get that Takuya kid to cook for me instead. That might actually heal my wounded soul. But you're cooking. No thanks. And /o/bell/b/jn.c//om. Tsunade still hadn't recovered from the horror of the last meal Kushina had made. After that one experience, there was no way she was going back for seconds. Unless Kushina was making rice balls, she wanted no part of it. Kushina's excitement deflated, turning into tears. Once again, she was rejected, though she had to admit her cooking skills were pretty terrible. I heard you applied to stay back a grade today. Mikoto's mom asked, looking at her daughter. Mikoto Uchiha awkwardly explained, well, I joked yesterday about wanting Takuya to graduate early so we could team up. But then Takuya took it seriously. He wants to be in the same grade as me, and when I suggested staying back a year, he said he'd apply for early graduation if I didn't. So I agreed to stay back. Mikoto's mom smirked, but that's not all I heard. Little Takuya told everyone at school that you promised to marry him when you grow up. Is that true? Mom. Mikoto Uchiha stomped her foot in frustration. Her mom laughed. Takuya's a good kid. It's a shame he didn't rejoin the family. That was always his mother's wish. The clan elders. Sigh. Mikoto pouted, thinking to herself, even if the elders begged him to come back now, he probably wouldn't. A genius who unlocked the double Tomo Sharingan before the age of 7. Those old geezers would definitely regret it later. Mikoto decided not to share this news with her family. She didn't want them blabbing and causing unnecessary trouble for Takuya. When and if Takuya wanted to reveal his Sharingan, that was his decision to make. Stupid boy. She fumed, remembering how Takuya had announced in front of all the teachers that she was going to marry him someday. That's so embarrassing. Now the whole school was buzzing about it. Hey, Snowy, things seem pretty lively tonight. Takuya couldn't sleep. Inside him, his little Ninetales, whom he had nicknamed Snowy, was growing restless. The little guy was visibly expanding, as if all the accumulated chakra had finally reached a tipping point. As it broke through this limit, Snowy's body started swelling. In no time, it had grown from the size of a buffalo to filling almost the entire room, and its chakra was surging like crazy. No tailed beast was small, even the Ninetales was just deceptively sleek. Compared to the world of Naruto's other nine-tailed beasts, Takuya's white Ninetales had always been the runt of the litter. But now, it was finally catching up. It seemed that after breaking through the barrier, Snowy's growth rate was doubling. Takuya's question went unanswered as Snowy appeared to be in a rapid growth phase. As for the nickname Snowy, that was Takuya's idea. Kushina had a Ninetales inside her, and he had his own, a special white one. And since his Ninetales was female, he couldn't just call her Kurama or Ninetales. Snowy suited her just fine, especially given her color. As Snowy grew, Takuya's own chakra became increasingly unstable. Thankfully, it didn't spread outside, otherwise, the Anbu would have been all over him. Explaining why he had Ninetales chakra in him would have been a nightmare. Snowy's growth continued almost until dawn before finally slowing down. Takuya was utterly exhausted, having barely slept all night. His chakra had been in such turmoil that he felt completely drained, sporting dark circles under his eyes like some kind of panda. Morning, Takuya. Minato greeted him with a grin already waiting outside his house. But when he noticed Takuya's panda eyes, he burst into laughter. Ahaha, what happened to you last night? Couldn't sleep because you were so excited to be in the same class as Mikoto. Did you stay up all night? Minato teased, poking Takuya's side with a mischievous grin. Get lost, Takuya grumbled, shoving Minato away. Excited. Seriously. You think I'm that shallow? I'm so tired. Groggy and half awake, Takuya made his way to the higher grade classroom, only to bump into Kushina at the door. Minato looked puzzled. Kushina, this is the upper grade classroom. What are you doing here? Because I skipped a grade too. There's no way you two are leaving me behind, Kushina declared, raising a tiny fist in mock anger. Takuya. Minato. Having connections definitely made a difference. They had to jump through hoops and pass all sorts of exams to skip a grade, but Kushina. She just showed up. Morning, everyone, Uchiha Mikoto greeted them as she arrived at the classroom door, smiling as she walked in with Takuya. Inside the classroom, when Kushina saw Takuya and Mikoto sitting together at the back, sharing breakfast, her smile faded. Kushina, what's wrong? Didn't you eat? Minato asked, offering his lunchbox. Thanks, but I've already eaten, Kushina replied, declining Minato's offer as she walked into the classroom. Minato scratched his head, confused. What's up with her? She was fine just a minute ago. Deep inside Kushina, the Ninetales suddenly opened its eyes, shifting uncomfortably and causing the chains wrapped around it to clink and rattle. Uzumaki brat, loosen these chains a bit, and I'll tell you a secret. Just a moment ago, when they were all close together, the Ninetales had caught a whiff of a familiar scent coming from Takuya. It was almost like another Ninetales, one whose chakra carried a faint, sweet fragrance. The Ninetales was baffled, wondering, when did my chakra start leaking? And why does it smell like that? Chapter 13. Chapter 13. If you've got the guts, don't run after school. Wait a second, Kurama thought. The chakra smells similar, but it's not mine. After pondering for a bit, the Nine Tails decided to test Kushina. Big Fox. Kushina suddenly found herself pulled into her inner world, staring at the massive Nine Tails, who was tightly bound by adamantine sealing chains. She hadn't even realized how she got there. Kushina, I smelled the chakra of a kindred spirit on that Takuya Yagami kid, the Nine Tails rumbled. You're trying to trick me again, aren't you? Kushina snapped, putting her hands on her hips and glaring at the giant fox. Granny Mito told me that all tailed beasts are evil, so I shouldn't trust a word you say. You just want to trick me into loosening your seal. Kurama. When the heck did I ever trick you? Kurama fumed. If anyone's evil, it's humans. I was just minding my own business, sleeping at home. Suddenly, Madara Uchiha comes out of nowhere, hits me with the main Shio Sharingan, and turns me into his personal summon to attack the Leaf Village. Then Hashirama Senju beats me down and seals me inside Mito Uzumaki. Where was I evil in any of that? You little brat, it's you humans who are the real monsters. Kurama roared, too furious to care about Takuya at the moment. Kushina's words had struck a nerve. Grrr. I'm going to eat you. Enraged, the Nine Tails began thrashing against its chains, straining to snap them as it lunged at Kushina, fangs bared. Kushina, however, merely pouted. She wasn't scared of Kurama anymore. She'd grown used to the fox's bluster. He might look fierce, but sealed like this, he was powerless. See? You're trying to trick me again. There's no way Takuya could have a tailed beast's chakra. You're just making things up, she declared confidently. You won't fool me, Nine Tails. Gah! Kurama almost choked in frustration, feeling like he might cough up blood. You little brat. I'm going to eat you. You're the real monster here. You're going to be the death of me. He bellowed. And just like that, Kushina was booted from her inner world. The little girl was convinced that the Nine Tails was just trying to trick her into loosening the seal so it could escape. Does it really think I'm that gullible? She thought. No way. Besides, I haven't even been close to Takuya lately. How could he possibly have tailed beast chakra? Kushina huffed to herself. The Nine Tails is just a big liar. Granny Mito was right, tailed beasts are evil. Takuya had no idea that just a faint trace of the scent on him hadn't escaped the Nine Tails' keen sense of smell. Foxes were part of the canine family, after all, and their noses were practically superpowered. Alright, class, today we have 4 new transfer students joining us. I'm sure you've heard about it already, the 4th grade teacher announced, clapping her hands to get everyone's attention. Now, let's have them come up and introduce themselves. Let's give them a warm welcome. The oldest, Mikoto Uchiha, stood up first. Hello, everyone. I'm Mikoto Uchiha. I've transferred from the 5th grade. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you. A round of applause followed. The older students were familiar with Mikoto, and most of the class greeted her warmly. Only a few were indifferent, and some even shot her unfriendly looks. I'm Takuya Yagami, and I've skipped up from the 2nd grade, Takuya said, keeping his introduction brief before sitting down. He wasn't interested in sharing hobbies or anything like that. I'm Minato Namikaze. I also skipped up from the 2nd grade. I look forward to getting to know everyone, Minato said politely. Unlike Takuya, Minato was courteous, but Takuya wasn't worried about any potential bullying. Anyone who tried had already learned the hard way. Besides, Takuya wasn't the type to be intimidated. If anyone wanted to cause trouble, they'd better be ready for a fight. Bring it on anytime, Takuya thought. I'm always up for a challenge. I'm Kushina Uzumaki, just like Takuya and Minato, I've skipped up from the 2nd grade. I'm looking forward to being in this class with all of you. 4 transfer students, 1 polite, 1 who seemed alright, and 2 who were either top performers or had the Hokage's personal recommendation. The teacher just hoped they wouldn't cause too much chaos in the class. Today's lesson is outdoor shuriken throwing. Please check your equipment pouches. If you don't have your tools, you can borrow some from me. We'll meet at the training field in 10 minutes. Amphi. After the teacher left, a group of students glared coldly at Takuya, who was sitting beside Mikoto Uchiha. Minato tensed up immediately. Are they going to fight? He wondered. Should I jump in? Takuya, noticing the tension, leaned back casually and addressed one of the boys, Uchiha Kasai. Don't give me that look. If you've got the guts, challenge me. I'm ready anytime. If not, get lost before I block the gate after school. An old grudge, Minato realized, watching the exchange. This Kasai had clearly tried to mess with Takuya before and had paid the price for it. Don't get cocky. I'm not afraid of you. Kasai snapped, his pride stung by Takuya's words. Sensing a potential confrontation, the rest of the class paused, eager to see what would happen next. Enough. Mikoto Uchiha stood up, exuding an aura of authority. Kasai, what's done is done. There's no need to bring it up again. If you lose, it'll only hurt your pride more. Fine, I'll let it slide for now because of Mikoto, Kasai grumbled, deciding to back down for the time being. He wasn't about to risk getting cornered by Takuya after school. Who was that guy? Minato whispered, still tense. Takuya, relaxing with his hands behind his head, explained, just a jerk from the Uchiha clan. He tried to bully me when we were kids, so I cracked his head open with a rock. And /o/bell/b/in.c//ohm. What? Minato was stunned, and Kushina looked equally shocked. Mikoto, exasperated, poked Takuya head lightly. You really shouldn't brag about that. You were only 3 years old. How could you have the guts to throw a rock at someone's head? He was 2 years older than me and had a gang with him. Of course, I had to strike first, or else I'd be the one getting beaten up, Takuya shrugged. He wasn't one to sit back and take it if someone messed with him, he'd hit back twice as hard. After that incident, Takuya had cornered Kasai a few more times after school, and the boy had finally backed off. But it seemed like Kasai was itching for trouble again, forgetting the beatings he received. Some people just never learn, Takuya thought. Looks like I'll have to remind him who's boss. Decision made, after school, he'd block the gate. If you've got the guts, don't run after school. We'll settle this at the gate. Chapter 14. Chapter 14. The thrill of smashing a brick into someone's face. Ha ha ha. Out of nowhere, Takuya started chuckling. It wasn't a normal laugh, though it was the kind of creepy laugh that made Minato and Kushina's skin crawl. Even Mikoto Uchiha looked uncomfortable. What? What are you up to? Minato rubbed his hands together, trying to shake off the goosebumps. If you've got something to say, just say it. Don't laugh like that. It's creepy. Let's ambush them at the gate. Takuya suddenly slapped the table and stood up. I figured it out, the Uchiha clan members always act up if they aren't put in their place regularly. The only way to keep them in check is to beat them down until they submit. What? What are you blinking at me for, Minato? Takuya looked confused. Uh-oh, this is bad news. Takuya quickly glanced over his shoulder to see Mikoto Ukua's face darkening. He coughed awkwardly. Oh, slip of the tongue, I meant that idiot Uchiha Shinka. If he doesn't get smacked around every now and then, he gets too cocky. I'm going to ambush him at the gate. Are you guys in? Beat up someone from the Uchiha clan. Minato looked like he was itching to join in. Kushina was also tempted. She didn't have anything against the Uchiha clan as a whole, but Uchiha Shinka. He was just plain annoying. If someone's annoying, a good beating usually fixes that. But seriously, it's only your first day in the senior class, and you're already thinking about causing trouble. Mikoto Uchiha held her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. The kunai throwing class was basically just a skills test to see how everyone measured up. Mikoto Uchiha, naturally gifted, easily scored full marks. Takuya also got full marks. Minato was just a hair off, scoring 9 out of 10. Only Kushina lagged behind a bit. The teacher was mainly focused on observing the four of them. After seeing Takuya, Mikoto, and Minato's scores, the teacher nodded in satisfaction. Not bad, they were already ahead of most students in their grade. Even though Kushina's score was a bit lower than the other three, at least she wasn't too far behind. There was still hope for improvement. After school that day, the four of them decided to hang out near the school gate, waiting for Uchiha Shinka, who was heading home with his gang. When he saw them, his face turned pale. Despite his earlier bravado in the classroom, deep down, Uchiha Shinka was terrified. Who wouldn't be after getting a rock smashed into their head by someone younger when they were kids? Uchiha Shinka's taunts were mostly because he was jealous of Takuya hanging out with Mikoto. But who would have guessed Takuya would actually show up to block the gate? Takuya, you jerk. You said it was just a warning. Is this what you call a warning, blocking the gate? Kushina, Mikoto, You two should step back. School fights aren't something girls should get involved in. Leave this to Minato and me. It wouldn't look good if the girls got caught fighting at school. It was better if he and Minato handled it. Takuya quickly grabbed 2 bricks from the flower bed near the gate and handed one to Minato. Minato took the brick, looking bewildered. Biting. With a brick. Minato, just aim for the face. I'm telling you, there's nothing more satisfying than smashing a brick into someone's face. You'll see, try it out. Minato was curious. After all, he'd never experienced that kind of satisfaction before. But hitting someone in the face with a brick wouldn't that be a bit too much? Maybe we should just use our fists instead. Minato was genuinely worried a brick to the face might seriously hurt someone. Trust me, you'll be fine. Takuya patted his chest confidently, with the air of someone who had been through it all. He put an arm around Minato's shoulders. A brick won't kill anyone. At most, you'll just break their nose and make them bleed a bit. No big deal. Minato. I feel like you're leading me down a dangerous path. Kushina and Mikoto were both exasperated. It seemed like Takuya was already corrupting Minato, the innocent and sunny boy. Uchiha Shinka, don't even think about running. As soon as Uchiha Shinka and his gang stepped out, Takuya charged at them with his brick. They're actually blocking the gate. The smile on Uchiha Shinka's face froze, and for a few seconds, he was too stunned to move. Then, remembering the last time his head was cracked open, he bolted. His little lackeys stared blankly at Takuya and Minato, who were charging at them with bricks. They shuddered, then quickly followed their boss in running away. On the school playground, a group of older boys was running for their lives, chased by a slightly younger kid brandishing a brick. The 2 Anbu ninjas secretly watching Kushina exchanged glances. Ninja A, are kids these days using bricks to fight? Ninja B, who knows? But that one leading the pack is from the Uchiha clan, right? Has it really come to this for the Uchiha? Ninja A, I'd run too. That kid with the brick isn't weak, and he fights dirty. He's only been in school for 2 years, and he's already beaten up all the senior bullies. Ninja B. In the end, Takuya's attempt to block the gate failed because the teacher showed up. Takuya quickly ditched the brick and grabbed Minato, making a run for it. Getting into fights was one thing, but getting caught by the teacher was a whole different story. The punishment would be much worse. Takuya wasn't actually trying to crack Uchiha Shinka's skull, he just wanted to scare him enough so that he'd stop picking fights. Just looking at him was annoying. If he really wanted to beat him up, he would have done it in class. Why wait until after school? You little brats, causing trouble on your first day in the senior class. The teacher laughed and shook his head as he watched Takuya and Minato run off. Then he glared at Uchiha Shinka and his gang. When you were bullying other students, did you think this day wouldn't come? 8 of you, running from 2 kids 2 years younger than you who are chasing you with bricks, how embarrassing. Uchiha Shinka and his gang looked like they were about to cry. It's not like we wanted to run, but we can't win in a fight. Back when Takuya first started school, he didn't hesitate to block our way and beat us up. Now, 2 years later, it's even easier for him. Only an idiot wouldn't run. What are we supposed to do? Stand there and get beaten? Takuya, do you think the teacher will scold us? On the way home, Minato was worried about getting in trouble with the teacher. After all, blocking the gate and chasing classmates with bricks wasn't exactly model student behavior. If they got caught, the teacher would definitely have a few words to say. Carrying groceries from the market, Takuya didn't seem bothered at all. What's there to be afraid of? Did we actually hit anyone? Didn't we? Minato scratched his head, confused. But we were blocking the gate and chasing people with bricks. What else would you call that? Did you actually hit anyone? Takuya began to coach Minato. We were just standing by the gate, and we only chased them with bricks. We didn't actually hit anyone, did we? And /o/bell/b/in.c//ohm. I guess that's true. Since we didn't hit anyone, how can it be called fighting? The teacher can't accuse us of something we didn't do. Don't worry, at most, they'll just tell us not to bully our classmates. We won't get scolded. Takuya was pretty experienced with this sort of thing. And just as Takuya predicted, the next day, the teacher only reminded them to get along with their classmates, avoid conflicts, and not to chase people with bricks. After that, there was no further scolding. Chapter 15, Chapter 15 Isn't having a tailed beast pet normal? After the incident at the gate, Takuya and Minato quickly gained a reputation as bullies in the class, causing the other students to avoid them. Even some of the girls who thought Takuya was cute now kept their distance out of fear. Master. A soft, sweet voice whispered in Takuya's ear. He felt something small and warm pressing against his chest and something wet licking his face. Groggily waking up, Takuya opened his eyes to find a small fox with 9 tails lying on his chest. He gently pushed it away, mumbling, "Snowy, stop it." He rolled over and went back to sleep. Snowy quietly curled up on the blanket. A few seconds later, Takuya's eyes shot open, and he sat up abruptly. Staring at the little fox nestled on his blanket, his face lit up with excitement. "Snowy, you can come out now." In the game, his exclusive tailed beast could assist in battles and act as a pet once it reached level 30. Since it was an exclusive tailed beast, Takuya wouldn't die like a Jinchuriki if the beast left his body. Takuya hadn't expected Snowy to reach level 30 so quickly, giving it the ability to leave his body. "Master," Snowy chirped, snuggling into the blankets, curling up into a ball in Takuya's arms. Isn't having a tailed beast as a pet standard for everyone? If your tailed beast can't fight outside your body, what kind of Jinchuriki are you? Takuya couldn't help but chuckle, remembering the jokes players used to make when he played the game in his past life. Snowy being able to fight outside meant another ace up Takuya's sleeve. When it wasn't convenient to use the tailed beast's chakra, he could summon Snowy as a familiar. Holding Snowy close, Takuya rolled over and continued to sleep. Since Snowy could now fight outside, when would it unlock its first fixed skill? Takuya noticed that all the skills he had set up before his transmigration were gone. Now, all he could do was hope for his exclusive player skills. Although there were only 4 exclusive skills, even one would significantly boost Takuya's strength. N/O/bel//in.C//ohm. A new batch of 5th-year students had graduated, with Nawaki among them. These students would leave the academy, step into the world of ninjas, and become true shinobi. But how many of these rookie ninjas would survive and grow remained unknown. Some students, like Mikoto Uchiha, had to repeat the year. Unlike Mikoto, though, they didn't volunteer to repeat, they were forced to. Some failed their exams, while others were sent back by their Jonin mentors. The majority had been sent back for further training by their mentors. Mikoto quickly rejoined the 5th-year students, and Takuya, Minato, and Kushina, who had recently skipped grades, were now also part of the 5th-year class. When the Ninja Academy was first established, students had to complete 6 years of schooling before they could graduate. Early graduation wasn't restricted. However, after the 3rd Hokage took office and the First Ninja War broke out, the number of Konoha's shinobi dwindled rapidly. As a result, the 6-year graduation requirement was shortened to 5 years. The enrollment age was also lowered from 6 to 5. This meant that instead of starting at 6 and graduating at 12, students now started at 5 and graduated at 10, all thanks to the 3rd Hokage's changes. It's like what capitalists do to squeeze workers, Takuya thought. Instead of letting things grow naturally, they forcefully pull the plants to speed up the harvest, not caring if they grow crooked or die. Yagami Takuya, Namikaze Minato, come to the office for a moment. After class, the teacher motioned for Takuya and Minato to follow him to the office. Minato looked back, puzzled. "Did you go block the gate again? Get lost." Takuya rolled his eyes. "I'm starting to think you were caught spying on girls in the bath." "No way. I'm not that kind of guy." Minato's face turned bright red as he stood up and loudly denied it. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Mikoto swatted Takuya's arm, signaling him to stop talking nonsense. "You might not be that kind of guy, but your future teacher definitely is." "Wait. If Minato skipped grades with me, would Drea still end up being his mentor?" When they reached the office, the teacher set down his teacup and said to them, "I called you here because the Hokage has taken a great interest in you too. He believes you're both geniuses worth nurturing for the village. After observing you for a while, he's decided to give you a reward." "Really?" Minato's face lit up with excitement at the idea that the Hokage had been keeping an eye on him. Takuya, however, discreetly rolled his eyes. He didn't buy it. The 3rd Hokage might be watching them, but he wouldn't just hand out rewards for no reason. Could it be Tsunade? Aside from Tsunade, Takuya couldn't think of anyone with that kind of influence. This is the ninjutsu scroll that the Hokage is rewarding you with. The two of you will study it together, and then return the scroll. Understand? The teacher handed over the ninjutsu scroll. These scrolls weren't easy to produce, and each one was worth a fortune. The scrolls were expensive, but the ninjutsu they contained were even more valuable. Even with money, you could only buy some basic jutsu. As for B rank or higher techniques, forget it. Even the daimyo, who controlled the wealth of the Land of Fire, couldn't gather too many ninjutsu scrolls. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Minato's eyes widened with excitement as he unrolled the scroll. If Takuya had any doubts before, now he was certain this was Tsunade's doing. He was even sure that this was the same scroll Tsunade had tried to give him earlier. Except now, instead of coming from Kushina, it was presented as a reward from the third Hokage. Takuya wouldn't have accepted it before, but now, well, why not take it? After all, once a ninjutsu scroll was issued, the village would record it as a reward, and even if you didn't learn it, you'd have to return it once you became a shinobi. This is awesome. We get to learn the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Minato's smile was as bright as the sun, making it clear why he was nicknamed the Yellow Flash. Takuya pulled Minato aside, draping an arm over his shoulder, and guided him to a quiet spot near the school's training grounds. He took the scroll from Minato and asked with a smirk, "Do you really think this ninjutsu scroll is a reward from the Hokage? Isn't it?" Minato blinked, confused. The teacher said we're geniuses, and the village wants to nurture us, so they're giving us this reward. No wonder you end up being the third Hokage's puppet for over a year, Takuya thought, sighing inwardly. Then, in a more serious tone, he said, "Minato, do you trust me?" Minato rarely saw Takuya this serious, so he nodded. "Of course I trust you. Since you trust me, then stop thanking the Hokage for this. If you want to be grateful, thank Tsunade-sensei instead. This scroll came from her, not the Hokage." Chapter 16. Chapter 16, Tsunade visits, Takuya's choice. Takuya decided not to bring Kushina into this situation. If Minato found out, he wouldn't know how to face her. It might even make him refuse to learn the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Trying to get something out of this under a false pretense. Forget it, I'd rather let Tsunade benefit from this than you. But why would Lady Tsunade give you a ninjutsu scroll? When did this happen? Why didn't I know about it? Minato was even more confused. Takuya casually flicked his silver hair back. Obviously, it's because I'm handsome. Isn't that an easy question? Minato. Whether you're handsome or not, I can't say, but your thick skin is undeniable. Whatever. The real question is, should I learn this jutsu or not? Minato looked at Takuya, torn. Takuya slapped him on the shoulder. Of course you should learn it. Why wouldn't you? The scroll's already been given to us, even if we don't learn it, the reward has been recorded. When we graduate, we'll have to pay it back through missions. Are you dumb? Come on, let's ditch class and head to the river to practice. I'm sure the teacher will understand. With that, Takuya decisively chose to skip class, dragging Minato along. Minato thought about it for a moment, then followed Takuya over the school wall. You little punks. When the teacher came into the classroom and saw the empty seats where Takuya and Minato should have been, his eye twitched. Seriously? I just gave you the reward scroll, and you immediately skip class. The Shadow Clone Jutsu was only a B rank technique, not too difficult to master. It didn't take long for Takuya and Minato to get the hang of it. You go to class, for me I am going to train. Takuya sent his Shadow Clone to attend class while he lounged at home. Before, he had no choice but to sit in class. Now that he had a Shadow Clone, who wanted to sit there bored and sleepy? When you have plenty of chakra, you can afford to be a little indulgent. If Minato knew I was sending a clone to class while I hid away to train, he'd probably be furious. Takuya sat by the river where he usually trained, holding a grilled fish skewered on a branch, grinning mischievously. The more time he spent with Minato, the more he noticed how Minato's worldview was shifting. Minato, who once idolized the third Hokage, was now showing less admiration, thanks to Takuya's influence. What impact this would have in the future, Takuya couldn't say. So this is what you're using the Shadow Clone Jutsu for. Tsunade suddenly jumped out of the trees and landed in front of Takuya. How did you figure that out? Takuya asked as he flipped the fish over. Seriously? Do you really think a Shadow Clone is the same as the real thing? I knew you had ulterior motives when you wanted to learn the shadow clone jutsu, and now I've caught you red-handed. Tsunade sat down casually, her eyes fixed on the grilled fish in Takuya's hand, making it clear she wanted a bite. You've got the bigger fists, so whatever you say goes. Takuya handed her the grilled fish and started cooking another one. Tsunade didn't hold back, taking big bites out of the fish. Watching her eat so heartily, Takuya couldn't help but worry she might choke on a bone. Did you need something from me, Lady Tsunade? Tsunade wasn't the type to wander around aimlessly. If she had free time, she'd rather spend it sleeping in or enjoying herself at a casino. The old man wants Drea and me to go see him. The Hokage. Because of me. Takuya didn't think he was important enough for the third Hokage to go out of his way. Because of you and that little Minato. Tsunade didn't hide anything. She tossed the fish bones and stick aside, dusting off her hands. As she spoke. The old man wants Drea and me to become Jonin instructors. Already. There was still some time before this year's students graduated, so why was the third Hokage assigning people so early? Takuya didn't really care whose team he ended up on, as long as he was with Makoto. If Minato was on the team too, that'd be great. If not, it couldn't be helped. As long as the instructor wasn't Orochimaru, Takuya could deal with it. He really couldn't stand Orochimaru's mannerisms, especially when he'd flick out that long forked tongue. It made Takuya's skin crawl. So, does that mean you'll be the instructor for Makoto and me? It's possible, Tsunade said, crossing her arms. But it'd only be you. Makoto Uchiha isn't being considered. After all, she's part of the Uchiha clan. Tsunade noticed Takuya's gaze shift and followed it, only to laugh in exasperation. Have you seen enough? Want to get a little closer? You'll get a better look that way. Ahem. Takuya coughed and rubbed his nose, embarrassed at getting caught sneaking a peek. It seemed like Tsunade had gone through another growth spurt. Her chest had gotten noticeably larger since they last met just a month ago. N/O/bell/B/jn.c//om. Takuya had glanced at her unintentionally, and now he'd been caught. What about Makoto? Why isn't she included? Takuya quickly changed the subject. Makoto had stayed back a year just for him. If they couldn't be on the same team, what was the point? Tsunade looked at Takuya but didn't answer. Takuya could already guess some of the reasons. It was likely a decision made by the higher-ups, more specifically, the third Hokage. It had nothing to do with Tsunade herself. He couldn't blame her for it. If that's the case, then Makoto and I will form our own team and find a suitable third member. Graduates of the Ninja Academy typically fell into three categories. The first were those who graduated early. After graduation, the village would assign them to a team, or they could find their own, though those teams were usually unstable. Future Kakashi fell into this category, constantly changing teams because he couldn't get along with his teammates. The second group was students who graduated with their peers and were placed in teams by the village, with a Jonin instructor assigned as their leader. The less skilled teams might get a Chunin instead. The last group refused the village's team assignments and chose their own path. If he couldn't be on the same team as Makoto, Takuya would rather not accept the village's team assignment. He'd prefer to team up with Makoto on their own. Takuya didn't believe that without a Jonin instructor, he'd starve. At worst, they'd be a restricted two-person team. He'd take the Chunin exam as soon as possible. Once he passed, all their problems would be solved. A strong ninja could take on various missions alone, so a two-person team wouldn't be an issue. And let's not forget, Makoto was no slouch in terms of power. A team with just Takuya and Makoto would be stronger than most Chunin squads. Since that was the case, why bother accepting the village's arrangement only to be split up? If we can't be on the same team, then Makoto staying back a year and me skipping a grade will all have been for nothing. There's no need to discuss it further. After graduation, I'll team up with Makoto, and as for Minato, it wouldn't be fair to drag Minato into this. Even though Takuya was sure Minato would jump at the chance if he asked. I'll respect whatever choice he makes. Tsunade frowned at him. Are you really going to do this? Yeah. Takuya nodded. I don't want to be separated from Makoto, and I wouldn't feel right if she got placed on another team. If we can't be together, then I'll give it up. I choose to team up with Makoto. Chapter 17, Who Can Escape the Wheel of Fate? I suddenly understand why Kushina is so attached to you. Even I have to see you in a new light. Though, unfortunately, you're still a bit small. After a moment of silence, Tsunade suddenly said something that made no sense. What are you talking about? Small. Are you teasing me? Can I let this slide? Takuya raised an eyebrow and gave Tsunade a once-over from head to toe. Don't worry, it'll grow. Besides, I prefer them bigger. Get lost. Tsunade's smile froze, and in the next second, she lashed out with a kick. Boom. The riverbank collapsed, and rocks and dirt tumbled into the water below. Takuya jumped onto a nearby tree, wiping the cold sweat from his brow. That was brutal. If that kick had connected, even if I survived, I'd be in a world of hurt. Keep it up, Tsunade. I'm rooting for you. There's room for more growth. Ahaha. Leaving Tsunade fuming with anger, Takuya disappeared into the forest. Tsunade chuckled through her irritation. That cheeky brat. But, is it really getting bigger? Could this become a burden? Instinctively, Tsunade glanced down. On her way home from school, Mikoto Uchiha was suddenly pulled aside by Takuya. Takuya, what's going on? Did something happen? You look so serious. Takuya tried to put on a serious face, but his young age betrayed him. Even with his serious expression, he just looked blank, making Mikoto want to laugh. Alright, that didn't work. Clearly, this isn't the right age for pulling off something like this. Takuya sighed and raised his hand. Tsunade came to see me today. She told me there's a good chance she'll be my Jonin instructor. How can that be? Isn't there still some time before graduation? Why is the village leadership already making assignments? But you and I won't be on the same team, right? Mikoto quickly understood why Takuya had been trying so hard to look serious and why he failed. Pretty much. Takuya opened the fridge, took out 2 bottles of milk, handed one to Mikoto, and took a few sips from the other. Browning, he said, I have no idea what the Hokage is thinking, making these decisions so early. Minato might end up under Drea's instruction. Minato too. Mikoto was already surprised that Takuya was being assigned so early. Who would have thought Minato was also being singled out? Never underestimate Minato. He's only been held back by his circumstances, but he's someone who's good at creating miracles as long as he has the right guidance and support. Minato's future achievements are well known. All he lacks is time to grow and access to the Flying Thunder God technique. As long as he gains enough experience, learns some sealing techniques, and masters the Flying Thunder God, Minato will soar. So, the reason you pulled me aside today is because… what are you doing? Before Mikoto could finish her sentence, Takuya reached over and playfully pulled on her cheek, leaving faint finger marks on her pale skin. It's because I regret to inform you, Mikoto Uchiha, that you might not be able to accept the village's team assignment. Why? Mikoto pushed his hand away, rubbing her cheek in annoyance as she looked up at him. Because you're going to form a 2-person team with me. I turned down Tsunade's offer. If we can't be on the same team, then you're staying back a year and my skipping ahead will have been meaningless. I'd rather skip the assignment altogether and form a 2-person team with you. And with our skills, it's not like we'd starve. Takuya snapped his fingers, his expression relaxed. You. Mikoto wanted to call him an idiot, but before she could, Takuya cut her off. N/O/vel/b/jn.c//om. He pulled her up from her chair and gently pushed her toward the kitchen. No need to say anything sentimental or scold me. I'm making a huge sacrifice here, so you're cooking tonight. I'm taking a break. A smooth path. Others would wish for a stable support system, but Takuya didn't need one. His support system was himself. Takuya was confident that in a few years, it wouldn't be clear who was supporting whom. Why get caught up in the Hokage faction's whirlpool? Why get dragged into the power struggles between the 3rd Hokage and Danzo? It's exhausting just thinking about it. Are you really going to form a 2-person team? Over dinner, Mikoto seemed worried. She still thought it would be better if Tsunade became Takuya's Jonin instructor. A 2-person team isn't bad, right? No one to bother us, and we can do whatever we want. Takuya gave her a knowing look, which made her blush. She rolled her eyes at him and focused on her food, not saying another word. Does Minato know about this? I didn't plan on telling Minato. I'm afraid he might do something rash. After thinking it over, Takuya decided to keep this from Minato for now. If Minato got carried away and decided to ditch the village's team assignment to join Takuya, it would cause a lot of trouble. Takuya had no way of getting Minato access to the Flying Thunder God technique. To learn that jutsu, Minato would need Dreia's help. Given Takuya's sensitive position, no matter how much he contributed, the third Hokage and Danzo would never let him choose a technique from the village's sealed jutsu scrolls. The most likely scenario would be getting some token rewards and being brushed aside. This isn't just baseless suspicion. Throughout the village's history, how many members of the Uchiha clan, despite their contributions, were freely allowed to choose jutsu from the scroll of seals? Takuya could say with confidence, almost none. Maybe Kagami Uchiha was an exception. Even though he wasn't considered a true member of the Uchiha clan, he still had Uchiha blood. The third Hokage and Danzo wouldn't hesitate to guard against him because of that. And now that Takuya had refused the village's team assignment, would the third Hokage still go out of his way to nurture him? It's just not possible. Tsunade hadn't told Minato anything either, probably because she wasn't close to him. Minato wasn't aware that his assignment had already been decided and was still eagerly wondering who he'd be teamed up with. His ideal team would be Takuya, Mikoto, and himself. But if that were the case, Kushina would be left out. Takuya, do you think the village will assign us to the same team after graduation? And if they do, what about the extra person? Seriously. You're worried about something that far ahead. We haven't even graduated yet, and you're already thinking about team dynamics. Don't worry, Kushina won't be chosen. The most likely scenario for Kushina is either being held back a year or graduating and then living quietly in the village. After all, she's a Jinchuriki. She can't just leave the village whenever she wants. Why? Will Kushina not be able to graduate? That shouldn't be the case. Even though she's struggled in some subjects, she's been working hard lately. Graduating shouldn't be a problem. Why would she be excluded? Well, there are some things you don't need to know right now. We'll talk about it later. Maybe Kushina will tell us herself eventually. Patting Minato on the shoulder, Takuya spoke earnestly, Minato, I know what you're thinking, but it's best if you stay away from Kushina for a while. Otherwise, you might get beaten up. Whether it was fate or not, Minato had gone from being afraid of Kushina to gradually, almost unconsciously, getting closer to her. It was clear he was developing feelings for her. Ahem, no, I'm not. You're just making stuff up. Minato's face turned red as he quickly shook his head, denying it. I don't like Kushina at all, definitely not. Yeah, right? Takuya couldn't be bothered to respond. It's practically written on your face, and you're still trying to deny it. By the way, when did the ninjas from the hidden cloud village sneak into Konoha to kidnap Kushina? Those sneaky bastards always like to play dirty. Just as Takuya predicted, Kushina had been in a bad mood lately, a really bad mood. With graduation approaching, Takuya and the others would soon be moving on to the next phase of their lives. But as the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, she couldn't leave the village so easily. Chapter 18, Refusing the village's arrangement, the third Hokage's headache. Kushina was feeling frustrated just thinking about it. And because of that, Minato, who had been trying to get closer to her lately, wasn't spared from her irritation. As graduation approached, even the students who used to skip class and sleep through lectures started working hard. They were all afraid that they might fail the exam and be held back for another year. Especially those who had already been forced to repeat a grade. If they failed the exam again, they might lose their chance to become a ninja for good. The village didn't have the time to keep letting them repeat the same grade over and over. Despite the tense atmosphere, the graduation exams finally arrived. Takuya, however, remained the same as always. He sent a shadow clone to attend classes for him, while he either trained by the river or lazed around at home. Today is the day you all know well. Don't be nervous, when I call your name, step forward for the exam. The graduation exam for regular students wasn't too difficult. The challenge lay in those who applied for early graduation. They needed to pass a real combat test to graduate successfully. I wonder who I'll be paired with. I want to be with Takuya. Yeah, right? You think you have a chance. Uchiha Mikoto hasn't even said anything yet. What's up? Hearing the chatter among their classmates, Uchiha Mikoto got both anxious and upset, giving Takuya a little shove. Takuya couldn't help but laugh. Ever since word got out about their request for early graduation, everyone assumed they were in a relationship. Honestly, Takuya was impressed by the kids in the world of shinobi. Especially when it came to emotions. By the age of 4 or 5, they already understood what it meant to like someone. Back in his previous life, 4 or 5-year-olds were still peeing their pants and playing in the mud. Once the exams were over, the 5th-year students began their break. Now, they just had to wait for the village to assign them to squads, receive their headbands, and get their ninja hits. Then, they'd officially become new genin. The other students had all left. It should have been a day for celebration, but the teacher couldn't feel any joy. Because once again, his students were causing trouble. Uchiha Makoto, Takuya Yagami, are you sure you want to form your own squad instead of letting the village arrange it? If it were just Takuya, the teacher wouldn't have been too surprised. After all, Takuya Yagami never followed the rules. But for Uchiha Makoto to go along with it too, this was making his head spin. What were they thinking? Do they realize what kind of dangers they'll face without a guiding sensei? I understand what you two are thinking, and I'll report this to Lord Hokage. But I hope you both seriously consider this, and don't make the wrong decision because of some early romance. Most students were forced to form their own squads out of necessity. But Takuya and Makoto, they were volunteering for it. This really shocked the teacher. Putting aside everything else, he hurriedly sent them off and rushed to the Hokage's office. Do you think Lord Hokage will approve? Leaving the ninja academy, Makoto couldn't help but worry about the decision. I don't know, maybe he will, maybe he won't. But he'll definitely be surprised. Takuya couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of the third Hokage's reaction. Sensei, just leave things like this to Orochimaru and Tsunade. I'm used to being lazy, and I still need to gather material for my writing. I don't have time to mentor students. The new graduates had all finished. Drea had rushed to the Hokage's office to complain. He didn't want to be a Jonin sensei, it would seriously interfere with his research and writing. Drea also felt that he wasn't cut out to be a teacher. Tsunade has already been assigned. Here, take a look at these students' profiles. If everything checks out. The third Hokage handed the files to Drea, not giving him a chance to refuse. Knock, knock, knock. An urgent knocking interrupted the Hokage's words. Drea sighed and took the files from the Hokage. Only then did the third Hokage smile and say, "Come in. Lord Hokage, I have something important to report." "Ah, it's you, Teacher Onoyama. Were the graduation exams unsuccessful?" As Hokage and head of the Ninja Academy, the third Hokage paid close attention to the school's teachers. If any of these teachers had important matters, they didn't need to schedule an appointment. They could come directly to him. This showed just how much the third Hokage valued the Ninja Academy. Teacher Onoyama looked dejected. Drea watched curiously, thinking, did this guy get bullied by his students? Lord Hokage, among the graduates this year, the top student, Takuya Yagami, and the second-place student, Uchiha Makoto, have requested to form their own squad. They don't want to be separated. PFFT. Ack. Ack. The third Hokage choked on his pipe smoke, while Drea was stunned. These two students sure had guts. This was something even he, Tsunade, and Orochimaru wouldn't dare do. Wait a minute, Takuya Yagami. That name sounded familiar. Where had he heard it before? Cough. 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 Like he was choking on something, the third Hokage's wrinkled old face turned red as he slammed his desk and shouted, ridiculous. The top two students refusing the village's arrangement to form their own squad. If this got out, it would be a laughingstock. It was practically a slap in the face to him. Hiruzen Sarutobi. You can go for now. I'll take care of this matter. Yes, Lord Hokage. Relieved, Teacher Onoyama bowed respectfully before leaving the Hokage's office. The hot potato was now out of his hands, he no longer had to worry about it. Drea, how do you think I should handle these two? Don't ask me. Drea shook his head like a rattle, eager to avoid the trouble. The last thing he wanted was to be involved. N/O/bel/b/jn.c//om. I'll take Minato under my wing, he's a good kid. But when it comes to those connected to the Uchiha, old man, you better handle that yourself. By the way, Takuya Yagami, that name sounds really familiar. Where have I heard it before? Tsunade thinks highly of the kid, but he's got Uchiha blood. Ever since Uchiha Kagami's death, the bridge between the Uchiha clan and the village had been severed. Tsunade's endorsement of Takuya led the third Hokage to consider nurturing the boy. He thought that maybe Takuya could become the next Kagami Uchiha. Plus, Takuya's displayed talent was impressive. He was worth the village's investment. Otherwise, the third Hokage wouldn't have considered entrusting him to Tsunade. Chapter 19. The Uchiha are also Konoha's Uchiha. It was clear that having Takuya as Tsunade's disciple meant he was now aligned with the Hokage's faction. Even though he had Uchiha blood, this alignment would keep him from being fully integrated into the village's power center, but at least he wouldn't face the same prejudice as the rest of the Uchiha. But this carefully laid plan was now being disrupted. One Takuya was enough. Adding Uchiha Mikoto to Tsunade's tutelage might lead the Uchiha to develop certain undesirable thoughts. This was something the third Hokage could not accept. Even if he were willing to overlook it, Danzo, Kaharu Utatane, and Homura Mitakato certainly wouldn't agree. I just remembered something, Drea said, clapping his hands. Tsunade mentioned this kid's a great cook. She hasn't stopped talking about it. 11. The third Hokage was speechless. Was the reason Tsunade favored him really just because he was a good cook? Seeing the Hokage deep in thought, Drea decided to make his exit. Old man, you think it over. I'm heading out. I'll be at the academy tomorrow. Drea figured it was better to get out and look for new inspiration for his writing than to sit around talking to the Hokage. With Tsunade still in the village, he didn't dare go to the bathhouse for fear of getting caught by her. A single punch from her could leave him half dead. Oh, the third Hokage nodded, waving his hand to dismiss Drea. Drea shook the papers in his hand before leaping out of the window. Not long after Drea left, someone arrived, just as the third Hokage expected. It was Danzo, the head of Konoha's root. Was Danzo's influence growing too much? There was no hiding anything that happened in the Hokage's office from him. Within 10 minutes, Danzo would surely show up. This made the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, uncomfortable. The root was a power granted by him, but that didn't mean Danzo had the right to infiltrate those closest to him. Sarutobi, I've always said the Uchiha cannot be trusted. Now that the news is out, where will you and I hide our faces? The third Hokage shook his head, not wanting to engage in this conversation with Danzo. How's the situation in the Land of Rain? In the past year or two, as the leader of a Megakure, Hanzo the Salamander, had risen to prominence, the village's actions had become increasingly aggressive. According to intelligence gathered by the Anbu, a Megakure seemed to be preparing for war. Under Hanzo's leadership, the tiny village was rapidly expanding its military power, increasing both its number of ninjas and overall strength. The destruction of Uzeshogakure had already caused undercurrents of tension across the shinobi world, which had been peaceful for years. N/O/vel/b/jn.c//om. Except for the isolated land of water, the frequency of minor conflicts between other nations had been steadily rising. Hanzo hasn't made any rash moves yet, but we need to stay vigilant. If the Land of Rain, under Hanzo's leadership, manages to annex the Land of Grass, it will become another formidable enemy for Konoha. As a Megakure's strength continued to grow, Hanzo, known as a demigod, would not be content with staying in a harsh, sparsely populated country. War and the invasion of other nations were the only paths for the Land of Rain to grow. And their first target would likely be Konoha's ally, the ever-unstable Land of Grass. The great nations had a tacit agreement that the buffer zones between them should not become too powerful. If the Land of Rain were to initiate a war, they'd be playing with fire. Anbu and Root are keeping a close watch on the Land of Rain. If there's any sign of trouble, our spies will bring the information back immediately. Danzo was confident. He believed his arrangements were flawless. It was only a matter of time before Hanzo made his move. Let's hope Hanzo isn't blinded by the lure of war, the third Hokage sighed. Danzo was a hawk, while the third Hokage leaned towards peace. But even as a dove, if the Land of Rain were to invade the Land of Grass or Konoha's territory, he would have no choice but to go to war with them. The conversation had drifted far off course. Annoyed, Danzo furrowed his brow and said coldly, Sarutobi, setting aside the Land of Rain for now, you can't just ignore the Uchiha situation. Those two kids even want to reject the village's arrangements. I always knew the Uchiha were inherently wicked. Why don't we just? That's enough, Danzo. The third Hokage couldn't take it anymore. Danzo was going too far. He sternly cut him off. I'll take care of these two children. If they truly wish to form a two-person squad, I'll approve it. We're all part of Konoha, and the Uchiha are Konoha's Uchiha. Now, go back and keep a close eye on Amigakure. Don't give them a chance to start a war. But Root is short on manpower. Whether it was the Uchiha or the Land of Rain, they were just excuses. Danzo's ultimate goal was to strengthen Root and expand his power. Even though he had infiltrated Anbu, only Root was truly under his control. His power would continue to grow only by expanding Root. He had already asked to expand Root's ranks several times, but the third Hokage hadn't. Agreed. The third Hokage believed that in peacetime, with Anbu and Root working together, there was no need for Root to grow any larger. But now that the Land of Rain was starting to show its fangs, with many Anbu sent out on missions, there was a shortage of manpower. Danzo had brought this up at just the right moment, making it difficult for the third Hokage to refuse outright. After some consideration, the Hokage said, "I'll discuss this with Kaharu and Homura. You may go now. I'll be waiting for your decision." Satisfied with the response, Danzo left. As for Takuya and Mikoto, they had already slipped from his mind. To him, they were just two Uchiha brats not worth his attention. "Old man, you wanted to see me." Tsunade arrived, still in her medical garb, fresh from the hospital. "This is about Takuya Yagami and Uchiha Mikoto's application," the third Hokage said, handing her the completed paperwork. "And you called me over just for this." Chapter 20. Do they take me for a rookie? Tsunade took the documents, glanced at them briefly, and then tossed them onto the desk with a casual flick, grumbling, "Old man, next time something like this comes up, don't drag me in so suddenly. I've got a surgery scheduled soon." "But Takuya Yagami is someone you've taken an interest in," the third Hokage said, watching her closely. Tsunade couldn't help but laugh, more out of frustration than humor. "Yes, I'm the one who saw potential in him, but it's you who wants him to become the next Uchiha Kagami, isn't it, sensei?" The third Hokage didn't like the sound of that. What did she mean by saying it was his idea to mold Takuya into another Uchiha Kagami? Fine, let them form their two-person squad if that's what they want. Honestly, how many graduates get assigned to ideal teams every year anyway? Tsunade continued, walking toward the door without bothering to look back. She waved her hand dismissively, adding, "Most of them end up having to find a team on their own." This was something only the higher-ups would allow to happen, and no one else dared to question it. But Tsunade wasn't one to hold back. If something bothered her, she was going to say it. Striding out of the room, Tsunade threw out a final piece of advice over her shoulder, "Old man, that kid Takuya isn't going to be the next Uchiha Kagami. You'd be better off letting him grow at his own pace since he doesn't seem keen on following your plans. Oh, and don't try to saddle me with any more students. I've got plenty to do at the hospital. There's a whole line of people waiting for surgeries." Tsunade's medical ninjutsu was renowned not just in Konoha but throughout the entire shinobi world. As long as she was in the village, there were always plenty of people seeking her help. Even though she had gambled away much of her clan's fortune, if Tsunade just worked a bit more and cut back on her gambling, she'd still be well off. But unfortunately, Tsunade couldn't keep her hands off the gambling tables. Since she hadn't taken Takuya under her wing, Tsunade decided to completely give up on the idea of taking on any students. Teaching brats was a hassle. She'd rather spend her time at the hospital, where she could at least make some money. What a pain, she thought, running a hand through her hair as she walked away. The thought of the massive gambling debt she still owed made her head ache. And skipping out on it wasn't an option if her creditors came knocking on the Hokage's door, she'd be utterly humiliated. While their peers were still waiting for the village to assign them a Jonin sensei, Takuya and Mikoto were already on their first mission as genin. Without a Jonin to guide them and being just a two-person team, the missions available to Takuya and Mikoto were mostly D-rank tasks. Catching stray cats, picking up trash, cleaning public restrooms. Just looking at the list of missions made Takuya dizzy. Some of the tasks were tolerable, but cleaning public restrooms? Seriously? Who came up with these missions? The Hokage's office? Well, in that case, Takuya decided to leave that task for the other teams. For their first mission, Takuya chose to help a farmer drive away some wild animals. Even though it was a D-rank mission, this type of task usually offered higher rewards and more contribution points compared to the average D-rank missions. Plus, it would be a good chance for Mikoto to gain some combat experience, so Takuya quickly accepted the mission. Since the objective was only to drive the animals away and not eliminate them, the mission was ranked as D rank. Had they been required to kill the animals, the mission would have been bumped up to C rank. Let's go, Takuya said, checking his gear as he and Mikoto registered at the village gate before heading out toward the farm. It was Mikoto's first mission, and she seemed both excited and nervous. After gathering information from the farmer, the two of them entered the nearby forests, where the wild animals had been causing trouble. The mission was simple: drive the animals out of the farm's territory, and the job would be done. If they managed to eliminate the threat entirely, the mission would automatically be upgraded to C rank, earning them the corresponding rewards and contribution points. But Takuya and Mikoto weren't too concerned about the money. As for the contribution points, well, some people valued them like gold, while others didn't see much use in them. For example, Minato's contribution points were sufficient to earn him the Flying Thunder God technique, thanks to Drea's support and the third Hokage's approval. But if you gave the same amount of points to an Uchiha, you'd be lucky to get an A- rank jutsu. In exchange, don't think the village is just being biased or targeting you. Be confident, because they absolutely are. Let's split up. You go that way, and I'll take this side, Takuya instructed, creating two shadow clones to widen their search area. In the world of shinobi, thanks to chakra and natural energy, many creatures grew to enormous sizes with formidable strength. The giant toads, snakes, and slugs from the three great sage regions were prime examples. Aside from these powerful summoning beasts, some of the other creatures were so strong that even Jonin would have a hard time dealing with them. Snowy, check for any strong chakra signatures in the forest. Master, there's a significant chakra presence to the southeast, Snowy reported. Following Snowy's guidance, Takuya quickly located a tiger nearly the size of a small house. The enormous orange cat seemed completely unaware of Takuya's presence, lounging lazily on the ground in the middle of its meal. Such strong chakra. This should fetch a nice price, Takuya thought, eyeing the giant cat. This was a lucrative opportunity. A beast like this could easily be sold as a summoning creature, something many shinobi would pay handsomely for, especially those who preferred aggressive types. Roar. Takuya's quiet musings woke the giant cat, which rolled over and, spotting him, let out a deafening roar. The trees around them shook as leaves fluttered down from the branches. With another roar, the massive tiger lunged at Takuya. Do they really think I'm just some rookie? Takuya muttered, easily dodging the tiger's powerful claws and delivering a swift kick to its jaw. Crash. The giant cat's massive body was sent flying, crashing through several trees and tearing up the ground beneath it. And /o/bell/b/jn.c//ohm. Takuya approached cautiously, expecting the beast to make another move, but what he found was rather unexpected. The once ferocious tiger was now curled up on the ground, clutching its head in pain, letting out low, pitiful whimpers as blood dripped from its mouth. It seemed that in the process of Takuya's kick, the tiger had bitten down on its own tongue, causing itself a significant amount of pain.